The morning bell of the Crusader fortress rings once, a single deep note that vibrates through the stone walls and into your small cell. You open your eyes to grey light filtering through a narrow slit window, the sky outside still holding the last traces of night. The air is cool and smells of dust and old wool. For a moment you lie on the straw mattress, listening to the echo of the bell fade into silence. Your body is stiff from sleep, but you know the routine without thought. The bell is not a command, but a familiar signal, a quiet reminder that the day's work waits in the scriptorium. You push back the rough wool blanket and sit up slowly, feeling the cold flagstones under your bare feet. The cell is small, just wide enough for the bed, a wooden stool and a small shelf holding a clay cup and a worn breviary. There are no decorations, no personal items beyond these necessities. The walls are bare grey stone, speckled with tiny crystals that catch the faint light. This is your home, and it has been for many years, a place of stillness where each morning begins with the same measured pace. You stand and reach for your habit, a long brown garment of coarse wool that hangs from a wooden peg. The fabric is heavy and a little rough against your skin, but it warms you quickly. You draw it over your head and let it fall around your ankles, then tie the simple rope belt at your waist. The movements are slow and unhurried, each one completed before the next begins. You run your fingers over the belt's knot, checking it is secure, and then smooth the front of the habit with a flat palm. The ritual of dressing is a quiet meditation, a way of shedding the last remnants of sleep. Next, you pick up your sandals from beside the bed. The leather is dark and softened by years of use, the straps worn thin where they cross your toes. You slip them on and feel the familiar pressure against your heels, the slight give of the soles as you shift your weight. Standing fully dressed, you take the clay cup from the shelf and pour a small amount of water from a jug into it. The water is cool and tastes faintly of the limestone from which it was drawn. You drink slowly, letting the liquid wash the dryness from your throat, then place the cup back in its spot. Now you open the cell door, a heavy wooden cell door, a heavy wooden slab with iron hinges that protest with a low groan. The corridor beyond is narrow and dim, lit only by the glow of a distant oil lamp set in a wall niche. The walls here are the same grey stone, cool to the touch, and the floor is made of uneven flagstones that have been polished smooth by countless footsteps over the decades. You step out and begin to walk, your sandals making a soft scuffing sound with each pace. The rhythm of your footsteps is slow and steady, a gentle beat that carries you past the storerooms on your left. Through a half-open door, you catch a glimpse of stacked barrels and sacks of grain, their shapes shadowy and still. A faint smell of dried herbs drifts from within, a mix of rosemary and something earthy. You do not pause, but continue on, your eyes fixed on the path ahead. The corridor takes a slight turn, and the lamplight grows stronger as you near the kitchen. The doorway here is wider, and you can see the orange glow of dying embers in the great hearth. A cook's helper is already moving about, a young man in a linen tunic who stirs a pot without looking up. The smell of yesterday's bread and a hint of wood smoke hangs in the air. You exchange no words, only a brief nod of acknowledgement that has been the same for years. The kitchen is not your destination, so you pass it by, the warmth of the fire brushing your cheek for a moment before the cooler air returns. Beyond the kitchen you walk past the infirmary. This door is closed, but from beneath it escapes a complex scent of herbal salves, vinegar, and clean linen. You hear a low murmur of voices inside, perhaps the infirmera speaking to a wounded man. But the words are too soft to distinguish. You do not stop. The infirmary is a place for the sick, and your work lies elsewhere. The corridor now leads to a narrow spiral staircase that curls upward inside the eastern tower. The steps are worn in the center, each one dipping slightly where feet have trodden for a century. You place your hand on the cold stone wall and begin to climb, your sandals finding the familiar hollows. The staircase is dark, with only a few arrow loops letting in thin shafts of grey morning light. The climb is not long, just 23 steps, and you count them silently as you always do. At the top you emerge into a small landing where another heavy door stands open, revealing the scriptorium. This room is your true home, the place where you will spend the day. It is a corner tower chamber, not large, but perfectly suited to its purpose. The walls are solid stone, but one side has a high window facing east, its arch supported by simple carved columns. The window is unglazed, letting in the cool air and the growing light of dawn. Below it sits your desk, a slanted wooden surface attached to a sturdy frame. In front of the desk is a wooden stool with a smooth, polished seat. You cross the room and settle onto the stool, the wood cool through your habit. Your hands rest for a moment on the desk, feeling the familiar grain of the oak, the tiny scratches left by quills and the faint ink stains that have become part of the wood itself. To your left is a shelf built into the stone wall, holding 3 clay ink pots, each with a small wooden stopper and a stack of clean parchment sheets held flat by a smooth river stone. To your right, a small shelf holds a wax tablet, a bronze stylus, a knife, and a lump of pumice for smoothing the parchment. Everything is arranged exactly as it was yesterday and as it will be tomorrow. There is comfort in this order, a quiet assurance that the world, at least in this small room, remains steady. You reach for the stack of parchment and lift the river stone, setting it aside with a soft clack. The top sheet is fresh, its surface pale brown and slightly rough, showing the faint pattern of hair follicles from the animal skin it once was. You run your fingertips gently across the surface, checking for any raised spots that might catch the quill. Finding one small imperfection near the edge, you take the pumice and rub it lightly in a circular motion. The sound is a dry whisper, like wind through dead leaves, and it blends with the distant calls of birds beginning to stir outside the window. When the spot is smooth, you blow away the fine dust and inspect the sheet again. Satisfied, you set the pumice down and turn your attention to the ink. The ink pot you choose is the one you prepared last evening. It is a small clay vessel with a narrow neck filled with a dark liquid made from oak gall, iron salts, and gum arabic. The mixture has settled overnight, and a thin skin has formed on the surface. You take a slim wooden stick from the shelf and carefully break the skin, stirring slowly until the ink is even and glossy. The stick makes a soft tapping sound against the inside of the pot as you stir, a quiet percussion that marks the beginning of the day's labor. The smell of the ink rises up, metallic and earthy, a scent that you've known for so long it is almost a part of your own breath. You wipe the stick on a scrap of cloth and set it aside, then pick up the quill. The quill is a goose feather, long and greyish-white, its vein trimmed neatly to a fine chisel point. You hold it up to the light, examining the tip for any sign of splitting. Finding it sound, you dip it into the ink, letting the nib drink just enough, then tap it gently against the pot's rim to remove any excess. The first stroke of the day is always a test. You bring the quill to a small scrap of parchment kept for this purpose and draw a single unbroken line that curves into a small letter, A. The ink flows smoothly, the line crisp and dark. You watch it dry for a moment, the glossy wetness fading to a matte black, then you nod to yourself. The tools are ready. Now you settle yourself on the stool, adjusting your posture so that your back is straight but not rigid. Your feet rest flat on the stone floor, one slightly ahead of the other. Your left hand holds the parchment steady, while your right holds the quill, the feather shaft resting lightly in the space between your thumb and forefinger. The window before you shows the fortress courtyard beginning to stir. You can hear the distant clink of a bucket being lowered into the well, the muffled call of a guard on the wall, the soft flutter of a dove's wings as it passes the window. None of these sounds distract you. They are simply the background of your life, as constant as the stone itself. You take a slow breath, and the morning light, now a pale gold, falls across the desk, illuminating the first empty page. The gathering of pages you are working on is a ledger, a record of the wounded who have come through the fortress infirmary. It is not a work of grand history or theology. It is a simple list of names and descriptions, a practical document that helps the infirmera keep track of treatments and outcomes. Yesterday you filled 2.5 sheets, and the current page awaits its first name. You glance at the wax tablet where the infirmera's assistant has scratched a few entries. The Latin abbreviations are familiar: nom, for name; vuln, for wound; not, for notes. You read the first line and prepare to copy it onto the parchment. The quill descends, and you begin to write. The first name is Guilelmus de Sancto Johann. You form the letters slowly, each one a deliberate act. The G is a broad curve, the U a simple dip, the I a straight stroke with a dot placed precisely above. The double L's are tall and narrow, and the M is a series of 3 humps that must not run together. You pause after the first name, lift the quill, and dip it again. The ink makes a tiny sound as the nib pierces the surface tension. Next you write the word vulnus, wound, and then describe the injury, a deep cut to the right forearm. You copy the phrase from the tablet, incisio profunda in brachio dextro, and add the infermera's note that the wound was stitched with linen thread, sutura cum filo lini. Each word flows from your hand with the steadiness of water dripping from a leaf. There is no hurry, no need to rush. The morning is long, and the list is not short. The light from the window shifts almost imperceptibly, the sun climbing higher beyond the fortress walls. You continue to the next name, Rodolphus Filius Balduini, a knight with a sword wound across his ribs. You write the name carefully, noting the spelling of Filius with its single L and the curved F that drops below the line. The wound description this time is vulnus gladii per costas, a sword wound through the ribs, and you add that the infirmera applied honey and clean cloth to the site. Mel et panis mundus impositus. The honey stickiness and the clean white cloth come to mind briefly, a small image that passes and fades. You keep writing, your hand moving across the page, the quill scratching a soft, continuous whisper. The process of copying a name has its own rhythm. Read the tablet, dip the quill, form the first letter, complete the word, lift the quill, glance at the tablet again for the next phrase, dip again. This rhythm repeats, each cycle slightly different in its duration but always returning to the same gentle pulse. Your breathing slows to match it, and the world outside the scriptorium grows distant. The earlier sounds of the courtyard fade, replaced by the quiet of the room, the faint rustle of the parchment as you shift it, the occasional soft click of the quill being set down on the wooden rest. The names become a stream, each one a small vessel carrying its brief cargo of information across the sea of the page. After a time, you pause to rest your hand. The muscles of your fingers are warm from the effort, and you flex them slowly, making a loose fist, then opening it wide. The movement feels good, a small release of the tension that builds from holding the quill. You look up from the desk and notice that the stone wall opposite has brightened, the grey now touched with a warmer hue. The dove has returned to the window ledge, its head cocked, its iridescent neck feathers shimmering. It coos once, a low, throaty sound, and then flies off again toward the chapel roof. You follow its flight for a moment, then return your gaze to the page. The ink has dried on the last line, and you run a finger lightly over it to check. It does not smudge, so you continue. The next entry is for a man-at-arms whose name is abbreviated in the tablet as Henry de Camp. You know this stands for Henricus de Campania, a soldier you have seen in the courtyard with a thick red beard. His wound is a bruised shoulder, contusio humerae, from a fall during a night watch. The note says he is to rest and apply a cold compress. You write the full name, smoothing the abbreviation into its proper form, and add the details with the same measured pace. The letters are smaller here, fitting neatly between the ruled lines you incised earlier with a blunt stylus. The lines themselves are invisible to anyone not looking closely, but they guide your hand, keeping the text straight and even across the page. The stack of clean parchment at your left elbow has barely diminished, but the filled lines on the current sheet are growing. You have now completed 6 names, each one a small monument of ink and time. You dip the quill again, and watch the black liquid bead on the tip before you bring it to the page. A single drop threatens to fall, but you catch it against the inkpot's rim, leaving a dark smear that you will later wipe away with a cloth. This small act of prevention is second nature, a habit learned from years of practice. The parchment is precious, and any marring of its surface would be a waste. You treat it with the same gentle care you would give a living thing, though it is only skin and time. Another name, Evo Copsiphilius, the cook's helper's son, a young man with a cut on his cheek from a kitchen knife. The cut is small, incisio parva ingena, and required only a strip of clean cloth and a prayer. You write the name with a certain tenderness, the letters round and neat. There is no emotion in your face, but the hand itself seems to know when a name belongs to someone young, forming the strokes with a lighter touch. You record the date, predi calendars, and the hour of the injury, hora tertia, noting that the wound was cleaned with vinegar. The vinegar's sharpness is almost tangible as you write the word acetum. Then you move to the next name without pause. The morning continues in this way, a slow accumulation of ink and parchment. You pause occasionally to stretch your shoulders, rolling them back and forth, or to rub the stiffness from your neck. The sun has now cleared the window's arch, and a beam of light falls directly onto the desk, warming the wood and casting a soft glow across the page. Dust motes float in the light, moving lazily in the still air, and you watch them for a moment, your eyes tracing their gentle drift. Then you pick up the quill again, and the scratching resumes. When the shadow of the window mullion has crept a hand's width across the floor, a servant enters the scriptorium. You do not hear the door open, only the soft whisper of footsteps, and then the quiet clink of a clay cup being placed on the side table behind you. The servant, a silent lay brother, leaves a piece of coarse bread and a small cup of watered wine. He does not speak, and you do not turn around. The scent of the fresh bread reaches you, yeasty and warm, and your stomach gives a small, quiet clench. You finish the word you are writing, a surname of 8 letters, before setting down the quill and turning to the food. You eat slowly, breaking the bread into small pieces and chewing each one thoroughly. The wine is weak, barely tinged with the taste of grapes, but it washes the dryness from your mouth. The bread has a gritty texture from the millstone, and you pick a small piece of stone from between your teeth with your tongue before swallowing. This meal is not a break from work, but a continuation of it in another form. Your eyes rest on the window while you eat, watching a cloud move across the sky beyond the fortress walls. The cloud is long and thin, stretched like a strand of wool, and it slowly changes shape as it drifts. You finish the bread, drink the last of the wine, and wipe your fingers on a corner of the cloth that covers the desk. Then you turn back to the ledger, refreshed and ready to continue. Before resuming, you check the ink level in the pot. It is lowered by a thumb's width, so you take the small jug of fresh ink kept on the shelf and carefully pour a little more into the pot. The ink swirls as it mixes black and glossy, and you stir it again with the wooden stick until the color is uniform. The quill needs a new trim. The tip has grown soft from use. You take the small knife, its blade thin and sharp, and hold the quill over the scrap of cloth. With 2 precise cuts you trim the nib, first one angle, then the other, then you slice a tiny amount from the very tip to create the writing edge. The shavings fall silently onto the cloth, and you test the quill on the scrap again. The line it draws is crisp and fine. Satisfied, you dip it into the fresh ink and return to the list. The next names are of squires, young men who serve the knights and carry their shields. Their wounds are minor, a strained wrist from lifting a heavy pack, a burn from a campfire, a twisted ankle. The words you write for them are brief, often just the body part and the treatment, carpus, manus, talus, rest, bandage, cold water. Each entry is a small, unremarkable piece of the larger tapestry of the fortress's daily life. You do not know these young men personally, but their names are familiar now after weeks of keeping the ledger. There is a silent companionship in the act of writing their names, a connection that asks nothing of you but your steady hand and your careful attention. The light changes again, the beam shifting further along the desk until it touches the stack of unused parchment. You shift the stack slightly, moving it out of the direct sun so the edges do not curl. The warmth on your hands is pleasant, and you pause for a moment to let your fingers soak in it. Outside, the sounds of the fortress have grown. The blacksmith's hammer rings in a distant rhythm, the clang of metal on metal, a horse whinnies in the stables. Voices call to one another in the courtyard, words muffled by stone. These sounds are the heartbeat of the fortress, a living presence that surrounds your silent work. You listen without truly hearing, the noise washing over you like water over a smooth stone. Back to the page, the quill dips, rises, scratches, the names stretch on. You have now reached the section of the tablet where the writing is smaller, the stylus marks faint. You lean closer to read them, your nose almost touching the wax. The letters are abbreviations and symbols, a shorthand that you have learned to interpret over time. One entry, one simply, M. Gaul, Vullen, Cap Soot. 3. You expand it in your mind. Michael Gallicus, wound to the head. 3 stitches. You write it out fully, the Latin phrases rolling smoothly from your memory. Michael, Natione Gallus, Vulnus in capite, suture tres. The act of translation is automatic, a small puzzle solved without conscious thought. The next entry is similar, and you handle it with the same quiet efficiency. By the time the sun has climbed high enough that the courtyard below is fully lit, you have completed a full page of names. You pause to admire the work, not with pride, but with a quiet sense of order restored. The page is covered in even lines of black script, each letter formed with care, the spacing consistent, the margins straight. It is a thing of simple beauty, a testament to patience and routine. You lay a sheet of clean scrap parchment over it to protect the surface, then set the heavy riverstone on top. The next sheet awaits, pale and empty, and you pull it toward you, aligning its edge with the desk's lip. The afternoon will bring more names, different wounds, perhaps some that are more serious. But for now, the morning is still with you. The light, gentle, the air cool and carrying the scent of ink. You sit for a moment without writing, your hands resting on the desk. Your eyes wander to the window, to the rectangle of blue sky where a hawk now circles slowly, its wings outstretched and motionless. The bird's patient turning mirrors your own, a quiet presence in the vast stillness of the day. You watch it for a long moment, feeling the steady rhythm of your own heart, the rise and fall of your chest. Then, with a small breath, you pick up the quill once more, dip it, and begin the second page. The first name of the new sheet is already in your mind, and your hand moves to write it, the scratching resuming its gentle lullaby, marking the passage of time in ink and silence. The morning bell has finished its single note, and you are already at your desk in the scriptorium. The room is exactly as you left it the evening before. The window still dark grey with the last of the dawn, the air cool and heavy with the smell of old stone. You settle onto the wooden stool, feeling its familiar smoothness beneath your habit, and let your gaze rest on the tools of your work. The stack of fresh parchment is on your left, held flat by a smooth river stone. The ink pots are on their shelf, small clay vessels with wooden stoppers. The quills lie in a neat row, their feather veins pale and soft. For a moment you simply sit, listening to the silence of the tower, allowing your breathing to slow into the rhythm of the new day. Then you reach for the parchment, and the first small task of preparation begins. You lift the river stone and set it aside with a quiet clack. The top sheet of parchment is pale brown, its surface marked by the faint, delicate pattern of hair follicles that once belonged to a calf or a sheep. You run your fingertips lightly over the sheet, tracing the slight grain. The texture is not perfectly smooth. There is a tiny rough spot near the upper right corner, a place where the scraper did not fully even the skin during the parchment maker's work. You can feel it as a small resistance against your finger, a slight catch in the otherwise uniform surface. This imperfection must be corrected before any ink touches the page. From the shelf to your right, you pick up a small knife, its blade thin and slightly curved at the tip, its wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. You hold the knife, as a painter might hold a brush, with a light but steady grip, and bring the blade to the rough spot at a shallow angle. The motion is a gentle scraping, short and controlled, moving from the center of the spot outward. The sound it makes is a dry whisper, like a breeze passing through a crack in the wall, barely audible even in the stillness of the room. You pause after a few strokes, Blow away the fine powder that has gathered and test the area with your finger once more. The resistance is gone. The surface is now ready. You set the knife down carefully, its blade pointing away from your hand, and turn your attention to the ink. The ink pot you will use today is the middle one on the shelf, a small clay vessel with a narrow neck that flares slightly at the rim. Inside is the ink you prepared yesterday evening, a dark liquid made from oak gall, crushed and soaked, mixed with iron salts and gum arabic, then left to settle overnight. The mixture separates in stillness, and now a thin skin has formed on the surface, dark and slightly glossy. You remove the wooden stopper, which fits snugly and comes free with a soft pop, and place it beside the pot. Taking a slim stick of beechwood, its end smoothed and rounded by countless stirrings, you gently break the skin and begin to stir. The stick moves in a slow, steady circle, the motion coming from your wrist rather than your whole arm. The ink swirls, thick at first, then gradually thinning as the settled particles blend back into the liquid. The sound of the stick against the clay is a soft, rhythmic tapping, a quiet percussion that blends with the first bird calls beginning outside the window. You continue stirring until the ink is perfectly even, its blackness glossy and deep, reflecting a tiny, distorted image of the arched window. Then you wipe the stick on a scrap of cloth kept for this purpose, leaving a dark smear that will dry and join the many others. The quills need your care next. You reach for the row of goose feathers and select one that is long and greyish-white, its vein full and unbroken. This feather has been used before, and its tip, though still sharp, has grown slightly soft from the friction of yesterday's writing. A fresh trim is needed. You pick up the small knife again, the same one you used for the parchment, and hold the quill up to the light from the window. The shaft is translucent near the base, a pale amber color, and you can see the hollow interior where the ink will be held. You position the blade at the tip, measuring the angle with your eye. The first cut is made with a single, decisive motion, slicing away a thin sliver of the quill at an angle, exposing a clean, sharp edge. You turn the quill slightly and make a second cut on the other side, forming a precise chisel point. A tiny piece of feather falls onto the desk, no larger than a grain of barley. Then, with the very tip of the knife, you slice a minuscule amount from the writing end, creating a flat edge that will deliver the ink smoothly. You test the point by pressing it gently against your fingertip. It is sharp without being painful, a fine balance. The quill is ready. Before you can use it, however, you must test the combination of ink and quill. You take a small scrap of parchment from a pile kept for this exact purpose, a piece already filled with practice letters and random strokes, and place it before you. Dipping the trimmed quill into the ink pot, you let the nib drink just enough, then tap it once against the rim to shed any excess. You bring the quill to the scrap and draw a single unbroken line, a smooth curve that bends and returns upon itself like the stem of a vine. The ink flows evenly, leaving a crisp black track that dries almost instantly to a matte finish. You watch the line for a moment, observing how it sits on the parchment, neither bleeding into a blur nor sitting on top like a bead. Then, next to the line, you form a small letter A, the same letter you have written countless times, its rounded belly and delicate ascender a familiar gesture. The letter emerges clean and precise. This is your daily ritual, a quiet confirmation that the tools are in harmony. You set the scrap aside and dip the quill once more, satisfied. The smell of the room now settles more deeply into your awareness. It is a composite scent, layers built up over decades and never fully developed. There is the metallic, earthy smell of the ink, sharp and a little sour, like wet stones in a forest. There is the dust of old mortar, fine and dry, that rises whenever the wind presses through the window crack. And there is the underlying smell of the stone itself, the limestone blocks that make up the fortress walls, which release a cool, clean scent, not unlike a cave. These smells mingle together in the still air, and you breathe them in as naturally as you breathe the outside air. They are the signature of the scriptorium, as familiar as the lines on your own palms. Your next act is to bring order to the work already completed. Yesterday you filled 2.5 sheets of parchment with names and wound descriptions. Those sheets now lie on the right side of the desk, slightly curled at the edges from the humidity of the night. You gather them carefully, handling each sheet by its edges to avoid touching the ink, though the ink is long dry. The first sheet goes on the desk, the second on top of it, and the half-filled third sheet on top of that. You align the edges by tapping the stack gently against the desk's surface until they are perfectly square. Then you take a leather cord from a hook on the wall, a thin strip of dark brown leather, soft and supple from use. You wrap the cord around the stack twice, crossing it at the center, and tie a simple knot, not too tight, just enough to hold the pages together. This bundle of finished work will later be taken to the infirmary for his review, but for now it rests neatly at the corner of the desk, a small monument to the previous day's labor. Now you reach for the current gathering, the book in progress that contains the unfinished ledger. This gathering is a thicker stack, perhaps 20 sheets, held together by a leather cord threaded through 2 small holes punched near the left margin. You lift it from the shelf, feeling its weight in your hands, and place it directly before you on the slanted desk. The cord is tied in a simple slit knot, and you undo it with a gentle tug, letting the ends fall loose. You open the gathering to the page where you stopped yesterday, a page half filled with names, the last entry ending with a small abbreviation that you recognize as a mark for the infirmary's attention. The blank space below it awaits today's work, a pale expanse of parchment that will soon be filled with careful letters. You smooth the page with your palm, pressing down the slight curl at the foredge, and set a small lead weight on the upper corner to keep the book open. The desk is now arranged exactly as you need it, ink pot at the upper right, quill rest in front, scrap parchment nearby, and the ledger open and ready. As you make these small adjustments, you become aware of the sounds from the fortress courtyard below. The scriptorium's high window does not look directly down into the yard, but sound travels upward through the stone, arriving faint and slightly muted. You hear the distant plink of a bucket as it strikes the stone rim of the well, followed by the creak of the rope, and then a splash. This is a sound you hear every morning, always at about the same time, as the water carrier begins his rounds. A moment later comes a low murmur of voices, the guards changing shift on the outer wall. You cannot make out any words, only the rise and fall of a brief exchange, a greeting, a report, perhaps a quiet joke. Then a single cough echoes off the stone, short and dry, and then silence returns. These sounds are as much a part of the morning as the light itself, a gentle confirmation that the fortress is alive and functioning, each person at their post. You do not consciously listen to them. They simply exist in the background, a quiet tapestry of life that requires no response. Your hand moves to the inkpot once more. You dip the quill, tap it, and hold it poised above the blank parchment. But before you write the first name of the day, you pause to take in the quality of the light. The window faces east, and the sun has now climbed high enough that its rays no longer slant steeply, but come more directly, filling the room with a cool, even illumination. The light falls across your hands, across the parchment, across the grain of the wooden desk, picking out tiny details that were invisible in the dimness of earlier. You see the fine network of scratches on the desk's surface, the evidence of quills that slipped and knives that marked the wood. You see the tiny fibers of the parchment, each one a pale strand woven into the sheet. You see the subtle variations in the ink's blackness, the way it is darkest where it pooled at the bottom of the pot and slightly thinner near the top. All these details are part of the quiet world of the scriptorium, a world where seen clearly is a form of prayer. You lower the quill and write the date at the top of the new section. The letters are small and neat, pretty Ides Mai, the day before the Ides of May. The ink flows without hesitation, and the letters appear on the parchment as if they had always been there, waiting to be revealed. This is the final act of preparation, the threshold between the readiness and the labor. You pause for a breath, the quill resting lightly in your fingers, and look out the window at the rectangle of pale sky. A single cloud passes across it, small and white, moving slowly from left to right. You watch it until it disappears beyond the arch, then return your gaze to the page. The first name from the infirmary's wax tablet is already in your mind, and you are ready to begin. The quiet morning holds you, and your hand moves forward to meet the day's work. The wax tablet rests on the desk beside your right hand, its surface marked with the fine pale scratches of the infirmaria's stylus. You take it up, feeling its familiar weight, the smooth bevel of its wooden frame, and hold it close to the candlelight. The first entry of the day is written in the abbreviated Latin that you have learned to read as easily as your own thoughts. The name is Guilelmus de Sancto Johann, and you sound it silently in your mind, breaking it into its parts. Guilelmus de Sancto Johanne. You set the tablet down, propping it against the inkpot so the words face you, and turn your attention to the open ledger. The parchment before you is pale and empty, waiting for this first name. You dip the quill into the ink, tap it once against the rim to shed any excess, and bring the nib to the page. The first letter is G, and you form it with a broad, sweeping curve that begins at the upper ruled line, drops downward and to the left, then crosses back upon itself in a tight loop before descending into a tail that curls beneath. The motion is smooth, your hand moving from the shoulder rather than the wrist, the quill gliding over the parchment with a whisper. Next comes the letter U, a simple stroke that dips down and rises again, its two minims connected by a thin hairline. The I that follows is a straight, narrow line with a small dot placed precisely above it, a dot so light it barely presses into the skin. Then the double L, each one a tall ascender that reaches upward before descending in a firm stroke. The two letters so close, they almost touch, but never do. The A is a small loop, the L another tall ascender, and the M requires 3 hump strokes, each identical in height and spacing, your hand maintaining a steady rhythm, as if counting silently to 3. You pause after this first syllable to dip the quill again, the nib drinking just enough ink for the next portion. The name continues, D. Sancto Johann. You write the D with its graceful back-leaning ascender, the E with its neat loop, then Sancto, each letter formed with the same unhurried care. The S begins with a thin upstroke that curves into a full, rounded body, its tail sweeping slightly below the line. The A is a small, closed shape, its belly round and its top open, and the N and C follow in quick, neat succession. The T is a straight stroke crossed by a horizontal bar that you draw with a single decisive motion, the quill not lifting between the two. Then the O, a perfect circle made by a single turn of the hand, and the second part of the name, Johann. The J is a descending letter, its tail dipping below the line in a gentle curve, and the O, H, A, N, N, As follow in their proper order, each one a small, familiar movement that your fingers know without conscious thought. You finish the name by lifting the quill and setting it down on the rest, the point facing away from you, and you look at the completed word on the page. It sits there in glossy black ink, still wet in places, the letters even and well proportioned. Now you must add the wound description. You glance at the wax tablet again, finding the abbreviated phrase Vol N, Insis, Prof, Dextat, Zurt, Line, Insis, Refortnade Volme Jukbelchsturais Skido the Tropkilch Crying Guri. You pick up the quill, dip it, and write the word Volnis. The Vav begins with a sharp angle at the top, then descends in a straight stroke before curving upward. The U is a simple dip, the L a tall ascender, the N another series of minims, and the U and S finish the word. Then you write Incisio Profunda, pausing after profunda to check the spelling, your eyes moving between the tablet and the page. In brachio dextro comes next. In, a small word that takes only a moment. Brachio with its B that rises tall and its that curves inward. Dextro, the D leaning backward, the E looped, the X a cross of 2 diagonal strokes. Finally you write Satura cum filo lini, the S of Satura echoing the shape of the earlier S in Sancto, the T crossed with a quick bar, the U a simple dip. The phrase tells that the wound was stitched with linen thread, and as you write the word lini, you think for a moment of the linen itself, the clean, pale threads that the infirmary pulls from a small bundle, the way they slide through the needle's eye and then through the skin. But the thought passes without lingering, and you return to the letters. The quill scratches softly as you draw the final I of Liney, and then you set it down again. The first entry of the day is complete. You pause to rub your right hand, the fingers curling and uncurling, the muscles warm from the sustained grip. The light from the window has shifted slightly, its edge now touching the corner of the desk where before it fell only on the stone. The morning is advancing, and you know there are more names waiting. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air in your throat, and then pick up the wax tablet once more. The second name is Rodulphus Filius Balduini, and you read it carefully, noting the spelling of Filius with its single L and the long I that follows. You draw the ledger closer, aligning its edge with the desk, and begin the second entry. The R of Radulphus is a grand letter, its descender sweeping downward and then curving back up into the bowl, the whole shape requiring a full turn of your wrist. The A that follows is small by comparison, a neat closed form, and the D, U, L, F, U, S each take their turn beneath your hand. The name feels longer than the first, stretching across the page in a procession of letters, and you find a quiet satisfaction in its steady unfolding. When you reach Filius, you write it with care, the F descending below the line, the I dotted lightly, the L ascending tall, the I and U forming a brief dip, the S closing the word with a small flourish. Then Balduini, the B is a bold letter with two round bowls stacked upon a straight stem, and you form each bowl with a single continuous stroke, the quill never leaving the page until the shape is complete. The A, L, D, U, I, N, I follow, and you finish by dotting the final I with a small, precise tap of the quill tip. The name is done, and you dip the ink once more for the wound. The wound of Rodulphus Filius Balduini is a sword cut across the ribs, vulnus gladii per costas, and the treatment was honey and clean cloth. You write vulnus gladii with the same careful hand, the G of gladii descending in a loop that mirrors the earlier G of Guilelmus, the L tall, the A small, the D leaning, the double I dotted neatly. Then per costas, the P drops below the line, the E loops, the R curves, and costas begins with a C that echoes the curve of the earlier C in incisio. The treatment phrase mel et panis mundus impositus is written next. The M of mel is a series of 3 humps, each one a small wave, and the E and L complete the word quickly. Panis mundus, the egg end descends, the A is round, the double N are a pair of minims, the U dips, the S curves, and then mundus follows with its own M, U, N, D, U, S. The word impositus requires a longer stretch of letters, and you form them steadily, the I dotted, the M humped, the P descending, the O a perfect circle, the S curving, the I dotted again, the T crossed, the U dipped, the S curved once more. When you have finished, you set the quill down and look at the page, where 2 complete entries now stand side by side, each one a small monument of ink and time. The scratching of the quill has been the only sound in the scriptorium, a continuous whisper that blends with the distant murmur of the fortress. Outside the window, the sky is a pale blue, and a single bird crosses the rectangle of light, its shadow flickering briefly on the wall. You do not watch it. Your eyes are on the wax tablet, moving to the third name. The entry is short, Petter, Demar, Vol. Glad, Hum. You read it fully as Petrus de Marisco, Valmus gladii in humero, a sword wound to the shoulder. You position the quill and begin to write. Petrus. The P is a grand letter, its descender sweeping down and then up into the bowl, much like the R before it, but with a closed loop at the base. The E, T, R, U, S follow, each one a familiar gesture, and then, de Marisco, the D leans, the E loops, the M rises tall with its 2 peaks, the A is small, the R curves, the I is dotted, the S curves, the E is dotted, the S curves, the S is a simple open shape, the O closes the name. The wound phrase, vulnus gladii in humero, you write in a steady stream. Vulnus gladii again. The letters repeating the shapes you have already formed twice this morning, and then in humero, the heech tall, the U dipped, the him heech, the humped, the E looped, the ERV curved, the O circular. The treatment note is brief, quies id ligatura, rest and a bandage. You write it, the Q with its tail, the U dipped, the I dotted, the E looped, the S curved, and then ligatura, its letters flowing one into the next until the word is complete. Your hand is growing warm now, the muscles of the fingers feeling the steady repetition. You set the quill down and flex your hand again, opening it wide and closing it into a loose fist several times. The stiffness is a familiar sensation, not painful, but present, a reminder of the work's physical nature. You roll your shoulders back, feeling the slight ache where the habit rubs against your skin, and then return your hand to the desk. The light has moved another finger's width, and the parchment now lies fully illuminated, the ink drying quickly in the gentle morning warmth. You dip the quill and turn your attention back to the tablet, ready for the false name of the day, and the scratching begins again, the quiet voice of the scriptorium speaking in letters and lines. The sun has climbed to its highest point, and the fortress around you has slipped into the deep quiet of midday. The sounds that filled the morning have faded one by one. The blacksmith's hammer no longer rings. The voices in the courtyard have withdrawn into shaded corners. The horses stand still in their stalls, and even the birds have ceased their calling. Through the high window of the scriptorium, the light falls directly onto your desk, a broad shaft of pale gold that covers the parchment and warms the wood. The heat is gentle, not oppressive, and you feel it on the backs of your hands as they rest on the page. The stone walls hold the coolness of the night, so the room itself remains comfortable, but the patch of sunlight is a small island of warmth that moves almost imperceptibly across your work. You notice how the ink dries faster now, the glossy wetness fading to matte black within a few heartbeats of the quill lifting, and you adjust your rhythm slightly to match this new pace. You have now moved past the knights and reached the section of the wax tablet devoted to the men-at-arms and squires. Their entries are shorter, the descriptions of their injuries briefer and simpler. The infirmaria's stylus marks are less elaborate here, often just a name, a body part, and a one-word treatment. You read the next entry, letting your eyes trace the faint scratches. Rob, famulus, contus, humor. The name expands in your mind to Robertus Famulus, Robert the servant, and the injury is a bruised shoulder, contusio humerae. You dip the quill into the ink pot, the nib slipping below the surface with a tiny sound, then tap it once and bring it to the page. The letters of Robertus form under your hand with a practiced ease, the R with its gram descender and curved bowl, the O a perfect circle, the B with its tall ascender, the E looped, the R curved, the T crossed with a single swift stroke, the U a simple dip, the S a gentle curve. The word famulus follows, the F descending below the line, the A small and round, the A series of 3 humps, the U another dip, the L tall, the U and S closing the word. Then you write contusio humeri, the C beginning with a curve, the O circular, the N a pair of minims, the T crossed, the U dipped, the S curved, the I dotted, the O circular again, and then humeri, the H tall, the U dipped, the MH tall, the U dipped, the I curved, the I dotted. The treatment is simply quaes, rest, and you write it as a single word centered beneath the entry, its letters small and unassuming. The whole entry takes only a few minutes, a brief addition to the growing list. The next name is Waltarus Scutifer, a squire with a sprained knee. The abbreviation reads W. Scutifer, a squire with a sprained knee. The abbreviation reads W. Scutifer. Lux, Jane. You expand it silently. Waltarus Scutifer, Lux Goldiaj. The W is a letter you write less often, its shape formed by 2 interlocking V's that you draw with a careful hand, ensuring the angles are sharp and the lines meet neatly. The everyday heroes whose follow, and then Scutifer, the S curves, the C is open, the U dips, the T is crossed, the I dotted, the F descends, the E loops, the R curves. The injury phrase luxtatio genu tells of a dislocation of the knee, and you write luxtatio with its L, tall, its O, dipped, its X a cross of 2 strokes, its a small, its T crossed, its O dotted, its O circular, then gnu, the G descending in a loop, the O, the gnu, the genine, a T, the genine, the G, the tinned airs, the U dip. The treatment is ligatura et quaes, a bandage and rest, and you record it with the same steady hand, the letters appearing one by one as if they were always waiting beneath the surface of the parchment. When the entry is complete, you set the quill down and flex your fingers, feeling a mild ache in the joints that has become a constant companion during these long midday hours. The warmth of the sun on your hands is soothing, and you pause for a moment to let it soak into your skin. Outside, the fortress is so still that you can hear the faint, distant hum of a bee somewhere beyond the window. A low, droning note that rises and falls without pattern. The sound blends with the rustle of the parchment as you shift the page slightly, aligning it more squarely with the desk's edge. You glance at the stack of finished sheets, now grown a little thicker, and then at the remaining clean parchment on your left, still a reassuring pile. The work is progressing steadily, each entry a small step forward in the long, quiet journey of the afternoon. The names of the men-at-arms and squires continue in a steady stream. Their wounds are the minor injuries of daily fortress life, a cut on the cheek from a splinter of wood, a burn on the hand from a cooking pot, a twisted ankle from a misstep on the stairs. You write each one without haste, the quill moving in its familiar rhythm. The repetition of certain words becomes a kind of gentle refrain. The word vulnus appears again and again, its letters always the same, the V with its sharp angle, the U dipped, the L tall, the N a pair of minims, the U ends closing, contusio with its contusio, incisio, the E dotted, the NCIO, incisio the E dotted, the NCIO. These words flow from your hand so often that your mind does not need to direct each stroke. Your fingers know the shapes and you watch them appear as if from a small distance, a witness to your own quiet labor. The names themselves begin to blur into a gentle procession. Henricus de Ponto, a bruise to the elbow. Stephanus Textor, a cut on the thumb. Evo Parvus, a burn on the palm. Martinus Faber, a splinter under the nail. Each name is a small story reduced to its simplest elements, and you are the recorder of these fragments, the keeper of the fortress's small sufferings. There is no drama in this work, no urgency, only the steady accumulation of ink on parchment. You find a deep, quiet peace in the repetition, the way the quill's scratching becomes a lullaby for the waking mind, a sound that asks nothing but to continue. At some point, you become aware of a soft sound behind you, the creak of the door opening, and then the whisper of sandals on stone. You do not turn. A servant, a lay brother whose face you know well, but whose name you have never learned, crosses the room and places a clay cup and a piece of bread on the side table. He does not speak, does not pause, does not even catch your eye. He simply sets the food down with a quiet clink and then withdraws, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. The whole event takes only a few seconds, and the silence returns immediately, as if nothing had happened. You finish the word you are writing, the final S of a surname, before you set the quill down and turn to the food. The cup contains watered wine, its color a pale pinkish brown, and the bread is a coarse brown loaf, its crust thick and its interior dense with tiny air pockets. You pick up the bread first, breaking off a small piece and placing it in your mouth. The texture is rough, and you chew slowly, feeling the grains of millstone grit that have become part of the bread. Tiny hard specks that you gently work around with your tongue. The wine is cool and slightly sharp, cutting through the dryness of the bread and washing it down. You eat while still facing the desk, your eyes resting on the half-filled page before you, not reading, but simply looking at the pattern of the letters, the way the lines of text create a texture of their own, a fabric woven from ink and skin. As you eat, you brush away any crumbs that fall onto the desk with a careful sweep of your hand, ensuring that none settle on the parchment. A single small crumb lands near the ink pot, and you pick it up with a moistened fingertip and place it back on the bread. The habit of cleanliness is deeply ingrained. The parchment is a precious surface, and any stray particle could mar the writing or clog the quill. You finish the bread, drink the last of the wine, and wipe your fingers on the small cloth that hangs from the side of the desk, a rag already stained with ink and dust. Then you return your attention fully to the work. The ink level in the pot has dropped noticeably. When you dip the quill, the nib now reaches deeper, and the angle of your hand must adjust slightly. You decide to refill it. From the shelf you take the small jug that holds fresh ink, a clay vessel with a pinched spout and a loop handle. You remove the wooden stopper from the ink pot and pour slowly, the dark liquid flowing in a thin, glossy stream. The ink swirls as it fills the pot, its surface catching the light and reflecting a tiny, distorted image of the window. You pour until the pot is nearly full, then set the jug aside, stopper the pot again for a moment, and give it a gentle swirl to mix the new ink with the old. When you remove the stopper and dip the quill, the ink flows smoothly, its color a deep, uniform black. The interruption has been brief, and the rhythm of the work resumes almost without a break. Your hand now moves, almost without a conscious thought. The quill dips, writes, lifts, dips again. The intervals between these actions are measured by the length of each word, the time it takes for the ink to dry, the brief pause as you read the next entry on the tablet. This rhythm has become a part of your breathing, a steady pulse that carries you through the midday hour. The sun has passed its peak and begun its slow descent, though the light remains bright and warm. The shadows under the ink pot and the quill rest have shifted slightly, their edges softening as the angle of the sun changes. You notice these small details without focusing on them, your awareness drifting over the room like the dust motes that float in the sunbeam. The names continue. Rodolphus de Bruria, a cut on the shin from a fall. Giselbertus Pictor, a bruised knuckle from a dropped hammer. Odo de Curtraco, a strain in the wrist from drawing a bow. Each entry follows the same pattern: name, wound, treatment. The words vulnus, contusio, incisio, luxatio appear and reappear. A small vocabulary of injury that has become as familiar as the daily prayers. Your hand forms the letters with a gentle, unhurried motion, the quill whispering across the page in a continuous, soothing sound. There is no need to think about what comes next. The tablet tells you, and your hand obeys. The work is a quiet meditation, a way of being present in the stillness of the day without any need for action or decision. As you write, you become aware of the texture of the parchment under your fingers. The surface is not perfectly uniform. There are tiny variations, a slight grain that runs in one direction, a small bump where a hair follicle once was, a patch that absorbed the ink a little more readily than the surrounding area. Your hand adjusts to these variations automatically, applying a fraction more pressure here, a slightly lighter touch there. The quill itself has its own personality. The feather flexes just a little with each stroke. The nib wears down gradually, and you will need to trim it again before the afternoon is over. But for now, it serves well. The ink flowing evenly, the letters emerging crisp and clear. The fortress remains silent, wrapped in the midday hush. The bee has stopped its droning, and the only sound beyond your own scratching is the distant, rhythmic creak of the well rope as someone draws water far below. The sound is slow and regular, a counterpart to the rhythm of your quill. You do not consciously synchronize with it, but the two rhythms exist together in the warm air, a quiet duet of daily labor. The heat of the sun on your hands has intensified slightly, and you feel a small bead of sweat form on your temple, which you wipe away with the back of your wrist without interrupting the flow of writing. The stack of completed pages on your right has grown during this hour, the names accumulating sheet by sheet. You pause once to turn a page, lifting the filled sheet carefully by its edge and laying it face down on the stack, then smoothing the new page before you. The leather cord that binds the gathering is loosened, and you tighten it with a small tug before continuing. The first entry on the new page is for a young squire named Petrus Parvus, a cut on the forehead from a low doorway. You write his name with a gentleness that seems to come from the letters themselves. The P grand, the E looped, the T crossed, the R curved, the U dipped, the S curved, and then parvus, the E descending, the A small, the R curved, the V angled, the U dipped, the S curved. The wound, incisio frontis, is brief, and the treatment, lavatio et panis, a washing and a cloth, is recorded with the same even hand. The entry joins the others on the fresh page, and you move immediately to the next name. The afternoon stretches on, the light slowly softening as the sun begins its long, gradual descent toward the western walls. Your hand continues its steady work, the quill dipping and writing in its endless, peaceful cycle. The midday silence holds you in its quiet embrace, and the scribe's rhythmic hand moves on, recording the small wounds of the day with the same care and patience it has shown for all the days before. The honey-colored light of the afternoon has begun to fill the scriptorium, seeping through the high eastern window and spreading across the stone walls in a warm golden wash. The harsh brightness of midday has softened, and the shadows under the ink pots and along the edges of the parchment have grown longer and less distinct, their edges blurring gently into the surrounding stone. You notice the change without lifting your head, the way the light now falls at a slant that catches the tiny raised fibers of the parchment, making them glow like fine threads of silk. The air in the room remains cool, drawn from the thick stone that holds the morning's chill, but the sunlight itself carries a gentle, quiet heat. You pause for a moment, your quill resting on the rest, and look up at the window. A single narrow cloud drifts across the blue rectangle of sky, thin and stretched, and then passes out of sight. The afternoon has settled in, and the fortress below is quiet, wrapped in the slower rhythm of the later hours. You turn back to the desk and reach for a fresh sheet of parchment from the stack on your left. The page you have just filled is complete, its surface covered in even lines of black script, and you lift it carefully by its edges and lay it face down on the growing stack of finished work. Then you take the new sheet, smooth it with your palm, and align it with the ledger's leather cord. This page will hold a new section, the entries for the archers injured during the recent siege. The wax tablet from the infirmary has a fresh set of names, their stylus marks deeper and more hurried than the earlier entries, as if written in haste during a busy night. You read the first line, the letters pressed firmly into the wax petter. Sagit. Vom. Quod. Fem. 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 Dia. 3. Die. 3. You expand the abbreviations in your mind, sounding each word silently. Petrus Sagittarius, Vulnus Quadrelli, in femore, Fabristi tertiare. Peter the Archer, a crossbow bolt wound in the thigh. Fever on the 3rd day. You pick up your quill, dip it, and begin. The name Petrus Sagittarius appears on the page letter by letter. The P is a grand, sweeping letter with a deep descender and a round bowl, its shape requiring a full turn of your wrist. The E follows with a small loop, then the T crossed by a single swift stroke, the R curved inward, the U R simple dip, and the S a gentle curve. Sagittarius is a longer word, and you write it with measured care. The S is a sinuous shape that begins with a thin upstroke and expands into a full, rounded body, its tail sweeping slightly below the line. The A is small and closed, the G descends in a looping tail, the I is dotted with a light tap, the double T is crossed by a single bar that spans both letters, the A is another neat oval, the R curves, the I is dotted, the U dips, and the S closes the word. You dip the quill again and add the wound description, Vulnus Quadrelli in femore. The word quadrelli, referring to the square-headed bolt, is rare in your ledger, and you form its letters with extra attention. The Q with its tail that sweeps below the line, the U dipped, the A small, the D leaning backward, the R curved, the A looped, the double L tall and close together, the A dotted. Then, in femore, the F descends, the E loops, the M is a series of 3 humps, the O is a perfect circle, the R curves, the E loops again. You pause after this, looking at the wax tablet for the next phrase. Febri die tertio, fever on the third day. You write febri for the soft, deliberate hand, the eve descending, the e looping, the b rising tall, the r curving, the e dotted, the es curving. The word feels heavier than the others, a small marker of a turn for the worse. De tertio follows, the d leaning, the I dotted, the e looped, and then tertio, the T crossed, the E looped, the R curved, the E crossed, the E looped, the R curved, the O circular. The entry is complete, and you set the quill down, noticing the slight tension in your fingers from forming the less familiar letters. The next several entries are all archers, and their injuries share a common origin. The crossbow bolts that flew during the siege, short and thick, their iron heads shaped like small pyramids. You read the names from the tablet: Johannes Sagittarius, Volnus Quadrelli in Brachio, Guido Sagittarius, Volnus Quadrelli in Cruri, Stephanus Sagittarius, Volnus Quadrelli in Humero. Each name follows the same pattern, and you write them in a steady rhythm. I Johannes, the I descending, the O circular, the all small, the all mar, the double NA pair of minims, the E looped, the S curved. Guido, the G with its broad curve and crossbar, the U dipped, the I dotted, the ein dotted, the I dotted. Stephanus, the S sinuous, the T crossed, the E looped, the P descending, the H tall, the A small, the NA pair of minims, the U dipped, the S curved. The wound descriptions vary only by the body part, in brachio, in curo, in humero. Brachio with its B rising tall, its R curved, its A small, its A open, its R tall, its I dotted, its R circular. Crur, the C open, the R curved, the U dipped, the R curved again, the E looped. Humero, the hot dal, the U dipped, the humped, the E looped, the R curved, the O circular. You dip the quill between each entry, the inkpot now showing a slight depression in its surface from your repeated use. The repetition is soothing, each name a small familiar journey across the parchment. But it is the note that follows these names that draws your attention and slows your hand. The tablet indicates that many of these archers have developed a wound fever. The abbreviation fever appears beside each name, sometimes with a date, sometimes with a date, sometimes with eidetic observations. You begin to copy the fever entries with the same steady pace, but there is a subtle shift in the quality of your attention, a slight deepening of focus. The word febris, which you wrote for Petrus, now appears again and again, and you form it each time with the same soft, deliberate strokes. The F descending, the A looping, the B rising, the R curving, the I dotted, the S curving. It becomes a refrain, a quiet repetition that marks this section of the ledger. You write the dates of the first dressing changes, the information drawn from the infirmaria's brief notes. For Petrus, the first dressing change was on the second day, and you add the words mutatio prima di secundo, the letters flowing in a small neat line. For Iohannes, the dressing was changed on the first day, mutatio prima di primo, and you record it exactly. For Guido, the fever began on the fourth day, febris di quarto, and the dressing was changed with a fresh application of salve. For Stephanus, the note is longer. The wound site had become red and warm to the touch, ruba et calor, and the fever started on the third day. You write ruba et calor with a steady hand, the R of rubel curving inward, the U dipped, the B rising, the O circular, the R curved again, then et, a small word that takes only a moment, and calor, the C open, the R toll, the O toll, the R circular, the R keller, the R kellad. The symptoms are recorded without comment, as all things are recorded here. The infirmaria's notes also include descriptions of the skin around the wounds, and you copy these observations with the same methodical care. For one archer, the skin was noted as tumidus, swollen, and you write tumidus with its T crossed, its U dipped, its unmasked humped, its E doped, its D leaning, its U dipped again, its E dipped again. For another, the skin was calidus et rubicundus, warm and reddish, and you form Calidus, H open, a small L tall, I dotted, D leaning, U dipped, S curved, then et, then rubicundus, the R curved, U dipped, B rising, I dotted, C open, U dipped, N a pair of minims, D leaning, U dipped, Sev turved. The words pile up gently, each one a small, precise observation that adds to the record of these men's bodies as they struggle against the unseen forces within their wounds. You note the appearance of a thin, pale discharge for one archer, writing the word senes, a term that you have written many times before. It's sinuous, it's a small, it's na, pair of minims, it's I dotted, it's E looped, it's curved again. You add the date when this discharge was first noticed, die quinto, and then move on. The poultice ingredients are listed next, and here the writing becomes almost a quiet catalogue of herbs and simples, each one familiar from the fortress garden. The infirmary used a mixture of yarrow, plantain, add a little salt, apply to the wound after cleaning. You write the names of the herbs with a gentle hand. Yarrow is milfolium in the Latin, and you form the letters im with its 3 humps, I dotted, L tall again, looped, F descending, O circular, L tall, I dotted, U dipped, M humped. The word is long, and you pause midway to dip the quill again. Plantain is plantago, the P descending, the L tall, the A small, the N a pair of minims, the T crossed, the A small again, the G descending in a loop, the O circular. Salt is simply sow, a short, neat word that you write with a quick stroke, the sinuous, the A small, the L tall. You add the instruction that the poultice was changed twice daily, mutatio bis in D, and then move to the next name. The afternoon light has shifted further, now pooling on the desk in a warm golden rectangle that covers the lower half of the parchment. The heat is pleasant on your hands, and you pause for a moment to turn them over, letting the light touch your palms. The ink dries almost instantly in this warmth, and you can write without waiting, the quill moving from word to word without a break. The scratching sound is the only noise, a soft, continuous whisper that fills the small room. Outside, the fortress remains quiet, but you hear a new sound, the distant, rhythmic tapping of a mason's hammer, someone repairing a stone on the outer wall. The tap, tap, tap is slow and regular, a faint heartbeat that reaches you through the thick walls. It does not disturb you, it simply adds another layer to the afternoon's quiet texture. You turn back to the ledger and find that the fever entries continue for several more names. A crossbowman named Rogerius is listed with a bolt wound in the calf, vulnus quadrelli insura, and a fever that began on the 2nd day. You write Rogerius with its grand R, its O circular, its G descending, its E looped, its R curved, its O dipped, its Ov turved. The calf is sura in Latin, and you write it with the S sinuous, the U dipped, the R curved, the A small. The fever note is the same, febri die secundo. Then comes an entry for a man named Balduinus, whose wound was in the foot, vulnus quadrelli in Pete, and whose fever began on the 5th day, febri began on the 5th day, febri die quinto, accompanied by a swelling that extended up the leg, tumor ascendens. You write tumor with its trost, its U dipped, its humped, its O circular, its O circular, its curved. Then ascendens, the A small, the sinuous, the C open, the O pair of minims, the D leaning, the oped again, the N another pair, the say is curved. The phrase is longer, and you take your time with it, ensuring each letter is properly formed. As you work, a dove lands on the stone window ledge outside. You do not see it at first, but you hear the soft flutter of its wings, a rapid muffled beating that ceases as it settles. You glance up and see the bird perched on the worn sill. Its feathers are soft grey, its neck iridescent with hints of purple and green. It turns its small head, one eye watching you with a calm, unfocused gaze. The dove coos twice, a low, throaty sound that resonates in the quiet room, and then it turns again, preens a feather under its wing, and settles into stillness. You watch it for a moment, the quill resting in your hand, the ink drying on the nib. The bird's presence is a small, gentle interruption, a reminder of the world beyond the parchment and the stone. Then, as suddenly as it arrived, it lifts its wings and flies away, disappearing into the pale blue sky. You return your eyes to the page, dip the quill, and continue. The next archer in the list is named Galfredus, a bolt wound in the forearm, vulnus quadrelli in antebrachio, and the fever note says that the man experienced chills and sweating, frigor et sudar. You write frigor, the fis ending, the R curved, the I dotted, the G descending in a loop, the O circular, the R curved. Then et, then sudar, the S sinuous, the U dipped, the D leaning, the O circular, the R curved. The symptoms are recorded simply, without elaboration. A second entry for the same man, dated 2 days later, notes that the fever persisted, febris pestat, and that the wound was bathed with a warm infusion of chamomile, lotio cum infusion calida, chamomili. You Latin words with care sounding them out in your mind as with care, the sewen. Encum, the O tick, the M toot, the thumped, infusio, the I dotted, the ein dotted, the ein dard, the O deeve, the tear, the sinuous, the I dotted, the O teed, the O deeve, the silelo, go, colido, the small, the bow teed, the salive, the delayed, the cell at a babdet, the soldabel tebet. The ink flows smoothly, and the letters appear one by one, each one a small precise mark that joins the others on the page. The afternoon wears on, and the honey-coloured light deepens slightly, taking on a faint amber hue as the sun continues its slow descent. The shadows under the ink pots and along the edges of the stack of parchment have grown longer, stretching across the desk like quiet fingers. Your hand moves in its steady rhythm, the quill dipping and writing, the scratch of the nib, a constant calming presence. The names and their fevers accumulate, each entry a small, quiet story of a body and its struggle, but you do not dwell on the meaning. You simply record, as you have always done, the letters flowing from your hand with the same care for each name, whether it belongs to a knight, a squire, or an archer, whose only mark on history is this brief line in a fortress ledger. You reach the end of the archer's section as the light begins to soften further, the golden rectangle on the desk now touching the far edge of the parchment. The last name in this group is a man named Odo, a bolt wound in the shoulder, and his entry includes the note that the fever broke on the 7th day, febri cessiti die septimo. You write cessit with a light, almost hopeful hand, the A open, the E looped, the doubles sinuous, the E dotted, the T crossed. It is a small, quiet word of resolution, and you place it on the page with the same even strokes as all the others. Then you set the quill down, flex your hand, and look out the window at the softening sky. The dove is gone, and the mason's hammer has fallen silent. The scriptorium is still and warm, and the page before you is nearly full, its surface a quiet testimony to the archers and their fevers, recorded without fanfare in the long, honeyed light of the afternoon. The ledger before you has grown thick with names, its gatherings of parchment swelling with the careful script of many days. You have turned back to the earlier pages now, those sheets you filled a week or a fortnight ago, their ink long dry and settled into the fibres. The infirmera has sent his wax tablet with a new set of notes, not fresh injuries but updates on men already recorded in these pages. You hold the tablet in your left hand, its surface warm from your grip, and read the first line, Hugo de Monaco, revisist, ruba faciae, frigus et calor. Hugo de Monaco, revisited, redness of the face, chills and heat. The name is familiar to you. You wrote it not long ago, a knight with a sword wound to the shoulder. Now you must find his entry in the ledger and add these new observations. You turn the pages with a slow, gentle hand, lifting each sheet by its edge and letting it fall softly onto the stack. The faint rustle of parchment is the only sound. As you search, your eyes trace the lines of names, each one a small record of a body and its wound. You pass Guilelmus de Sancto Johann with his stitched forearm, Rodolphus Filius Balduini with his ribs bound in honey and cloth, Petrus Sagittarius with his crossbow bolt and fever. The names are like landmarks on a familiar road, each one a marker of a day spent at this desk. You find Hugo de Monaco near the bottom of a page, his entry brief, Volnus gladii in humero, sutura cum filo, lini, chias. You place your finger beside the name and then reach for your quill. Beside the entry you draw a small, neat cross, the monastery's custom for those who require special prayer. The mark is simple, one short horizontal stroke, one slightly longer vertical stroke, their intersections centered precisely. The ink pools for a moment at the crossing, then dries flat. This small symbol speaks of a turn for the worse, a soul now listed among the feverish and the uncertain. You pause, your hand resting on the page, and feel the slight texture of the parchment under your fingertips, the fine grain that runs in one direction. Then you dip the quill again and begin to write the update. The new entry goes beneath the original one, indented slightly to mark it as a later edition. You write the date first, Pride Ides Uni, then the observations from the tablet. The words come slowly, each letter formed with the same care as the original name. Rubor faciae, the R curves, the U dips, the B rises tall. The O is a perfect circle, the R curves again. Faciae, the F descends, the A is small. The C is open, the I is dotted, the E loops, the I dotted once more. Frigus et cala, the F descends, the R curves, the I dotted, the G descends in a loop, the U dips, the S curves. Then et, then cala with its C open, its A small, its L tall, its O circular, its O circular. The words sit on the page beneath the original entry, a quiet postscript to the earlier report. You read them over once, checking the spelling against the tablet, and then move to the next name. Stephanus Carpentarius is the next on the list. You remember writing his name as well. A carpenter with a crushed hand, his injury sustained during the repair of a siege engine. You search for him in the ledger, turning back a page and then forward again, until you find the entry. The original note reads, Stephanus Carpentarius, contusio manus dextrae, ligatura et quaes. The update from the infirmera is brief, manus dumida, non manducat, fever, hand swollen, he does not eat. You draw the small cross beside his name with a steady hand, the quill making a soft scratch as the lines cross. Then you write the date in the observations. Fripris you have written many times today, and the letters flow automatically, F descending, E looping, B rising, R curving, I dotted, S curving. Managed to meter, the M humped 3 times, the A small, the NA, pair of minims, the U dipped, the S curved. To meter with its T crossed, its U dipped, its M humped, its I dotted, its D leaning, its A small. Non-manducat, the NA pair of minims, the O circular, the N another pair, the MH, the humped, the A small, the NA pair again, the D leaning, the U dipped, the C open, the A small, the T crossed. The phrase is a quiet, grim observation, but you write it without any change of pace, the letters as even and measured as any others. The light in the scriptorium has continued its slow shift, the golden rectangle on the desk now pulling back toward the window, leaving the edges of the parchment in a soft shadow. The air remains warm, but the heat is no longer direct, and a slight coolness begins to drift from the stone walls. You notice the change without pausing, your body adjusting to the new temperature as your hand continues its work. The quill moves across the page, dipping and writing, the rhythm undisturbed. Ivo Cosi Filius, the cook's helper's son, is next on the tablet. You recall his name from the earlier pages, a young man with a small cut on his cheek, a wound that seemed so minor it required only a strip of cloth and a prayer. Now the infirmera's note tells a different story. The entry reads, Revisis, febris alta, ruber circumvolnus, sudor nocturnus. Revisited, high fever, redness around the wound, night sweats. You find his entry in the ledger, the original letters still crisp and clean. Ivo cosi filius, incisio parva ingina, lavatio et panus. You draw the cross beside his name, the vertical stroke descending smoothly, the horizontal stroke crossing it with a light, precise motion. Then you write the update. Febrice alter, febrices before. Alter with its a small, its L tall, its T crossed, its a small again. Rubor circumvolnus, rubor you have written already today, the R curved, the U dipped, the U dipped, the R bising, the O circular, the R curved. Circum with its E open, its E dotted, its E curved, its open again. Its EU dipped, its E open again. Its EU dipped, its E open toll. Volnus with its V angled, its EU dipped, its EO toll, its EO, its EO, its EO, its EO perv, its EOt. Sudor nocturnus, sudor with its sinuous, its U dipped, its D leaning, its O circular, its R curved. Nocturnus with its NA pair of minims, its O circular, its open, its T open, its T crossed, its U dipped, its R curved, its arved NA pair again, its U dipped, its S curved. The words are heavy with implication, but your hand does not falter. You add a small note about the treatment. The infirmera has ordered a poultice of crushed garlic and bread mold. Allium et mucor panis, applied twice daily. You write the new Latin words with care, the double L of allium rising tall, the M of mucor humped, the M of mucor humped, the O circular, the R curved. The entry is complete, and you set the quill down to flex your fingers. The next name on the tablet is Rogerus Scutiger, the shield-bearer. His original wound was a deep bruise to the thigh from a falling shield, contusio femoris, an injury that seemed straightforward. Now the update reads, Revisis, cala magnus, non dormit, delirat nocte. Revisited, great heat, he does not sleep, he is delirious at night. You search the ledger for his entry, your finger moving down the rows of names until you find it. The cross goes beside it, a small, silent marker. Then you write the date and the symptoms. Cala magnus, calo as before, Magnus with its humped, its a small, its G descending, its NA pair of minims, its U dipped, its S curved. Non dormit, non as before, dormit with its D leaning, its O circular, its R curved, its arm humped, its I dotted, its T crossed. Delirat nocte, delirat with its D leaning, its E looped, its L tall, its I dotted, its R curved, its A small, its T crossed, nocte with its N a pair, its O circular, its O open, its T crossed, its L looped. The word delirat is a rare one in your ledger, and you form it with extra attention, ensuring the letters are properly spaced and clear. The infirmera's note adds that the man has been given a draught of poppy and mandrake, potio papaverus e mandragore, to help him sleep. You write the names of the herbs slowly, the P of papaverus descending, the vengled, the R curved, mandragore a longer word, the M humped, the A small, the NA pair, the D leaning, the R curved, the D leaning, the R curved, the A small, the descending, the R circular, the R curved, the A small, the A looped. The draft is recorded without comment, simply another fact in the long list of facts. As you work through these recurring names, you notice a pattern emerging in the phrases you write. The same words appear again and again: calidus, frigidus, sudor, fabrici, non manducat, non dormit. They become a quiet litany, a repeated prayer of symptoms that marks the progress of the illness through the wounded bodies of the fortress. You do not dwell on the meaning, but you are aware of it in a distant, muted way, like a sound heard through a thick stone wall. Your hand continues to write, forming each letter with the same care, the same measured pace. The cross you draw beside each name is a small, uniform mark, identical to all the others, a silent signal that this man has entered the uncertain territory of the fever ward. The shadows in the scriptorium have now grown long and deep, stretching from the corners of the room toward the desk. The honey-colored light of the afternoon has faded to a pale amber, and the sun is no longer visible through the window, only its glow touching the sky beyond the fortress walls. The air has cooled noticeably, and you feel a slight chill on the back of your neck, where the habit does not quite cover. You know that soon you will need to light a candle, but for now the remaining daylight is still sufficient. You hold the parchment a little closer to your eyes, tilting it to catch the last of the light, and continue to read the infirmera's tablet. The next entry is for Guilelmus de Sancto Johann, the knight whose name you wrote at the very beginning of the day's work. His wound was a deep cut to the right forearm, stitched neatly with linen thread. The update on the tablet is brief but serious. Revisis, rubor et tumor, febris, tertiana. Revisited, redness and swelling, tertian fever. You turn the pages back to the very first section of the ledger, finding his entry near the top of a sheet. The original letters look up at you, still crisp and dark. You draw the cross beside his name, the quill scratching softly, and then add the new information. Rubor et tumor you have written before, but you form the words again with the same attention. Rubor with its R curved, its U dipped, its B rising, its O circular, its R curved, its R curved. Et tumor with its trost, its U dipped, its R curved, its U dipped, its arm humped, its O circular, its R curved. Febris tertiana. Febris as always. Tertiana, a longer word. The T crossed, the E looped, the R curved, the T crossed again, the E dotted, the A small, the NA pair of minims, the A small. The tertian fever coming every other day is a pattern you have seen before in these pages. You record it and then note the treatment. The wound has been reopened and cleaned with vinegar. Vol nos repetum et lotum et soto. The word repetum is unusual, and you write it slowly. The E curved, the E looped, the A small, the P descending, the E looped again, the E curved, the T crossed, the U dipped, the M hemped. The vinegar, acetum, is a sharp, clean word, and you form its letters with a precise touch. The next name on the tablet is one you do not recognize immediately. It reads, Fulco detade, revisus, voco detade, revisisus, volnus putridum, odor gravis, febris continua. Fulco detade, revisited, wound putride, heavy odor, continuous fever. You do not remember writing his original entry, so you search through the ledger page by page, scanning the names until you find it. The original wound was a cut to the leg, incisio incur, sustained during a patrol. It was treated simply with a bandage and rest. Now the update speaks of decay. You draw the cross, its two strokes intersecting cleanly, and then write the grim phrases. Volnus putridum, volnus as always, putridum, with its P descending, its U dipped, its T crossed, its E dotted, its D lining, its U dipped, its ein dotted, its ein dotted, its U dipped, its humped. Odor gravis, odor with its O circular, its D leaning, its O circular again, its O curved. Gravis with its D descending, its O curved, its A small, its V angled, its curved. Febris continua, febris as before, continua with its A open, its O circular, its NA pair, its T crossed, its I dotted, its N another pair, its O dipped, its A small. The heavy odor of a putrid wound is something you have never experienced directly, but the words themselves seem to carry a weight, a density, and you write them with a slightly slower hand, the letters pressing a fraction deeper into the parchment. The treatment note says that the wound was washed with a decoction of wormwood and myrrh, locio cum decoctione absinthiae myrrhae. The herbal names are long and complex, and you sound them out in your mind as you write. Absinthiae with its A small, its B rising, its sinuous, its it dotted, its NA pair, its crossed, its tall, its tall, its it dotted again. Myrrha with its N hate, with its its E a letter you rarely write, formed with a descending curve and a dot, its double talls, its ache tall, its lots, its lots, the words spread across the page, and you pause to let the ink dry before adding the date. The light is now very low, the last of the sunset fading from the window. The scriptorium is filled with a soft grey dimness, the edges of the furniture blurring into the shadows. You reach for the tallow candle that sits on the corner of the desk, a thick, yellow-white column with a blackened wick. Beside it is a small iron striker and a piece of flint. You take the striker in your left hand and the flint in your right, and you strike them together once, twice, 3 times, each impact producing a brief, bright spark that dies in the air. On the 4th strike, the spark lands on the wick and catches, a tiny flame flickering to life and then steadying into a small, golden tongue. You hold the candle for a moment, watching the flame dance, then set it in its iron holder. The light pushes back the shadows, casting a warm, wavering glow across the desk and the open ledger. The flame makes a soft, barely audible hiss, and the smell of burning tallow fills the air, a faintly animal scent that mingles with the ink and the stone. In the candlelight, the page before you looks different. The black ink gleams with a slight gloss where it is still fresh, and the shadows of the letters stretch slightly on the textured parchment. Your own hands, illuminated from above, cast moving shadows that flicker as you work. The fortress outside is dark now, the window a rectangle of deep blue-black. You hear the faint, distant sound of the sentry's call, a single word that echoes off the stone and fades. The sound is a marker of the late hour, and you know that you will not finish all the updates tonight. But there are a few more names on the tablet, and you decide to complete them before closing the book. The second to last name is Radulphus Filius Balduin, the knight with the sword wound across his ribs. His update reads, Revisus dolo alluctus pus evil ner, febris levis. Revisited, pain increased, pus from the wound, mild fever. Revisited, pain increased, pus from the wound, mild fever. You find his entry easily now, the cross going beside it with a practiced motion. Dulla uctus, dulla with its D leaning, its O circular, its ul tall, its O circular again, its R curved. Alluctus with its a small, its U dipped, its R curved, its they open, its T crossed, its U dipped, its curved. Pusse vulnera, pus is a short, unpleasant word, the P descending, the U dipped, the S curved. E vulnera, E a single loop, vulnera with its V angled, its U dipped, its L tall, its NA pair, its L looped, its S curved, its S looped, its S curved. Febris, levis, febris as always, levis with its lol, its E looped, its V angled, its E dotted, its erved. The pus is a new development, and you record it with the same detachment as all the other symptoms. The treatment is a warm compress of marshmallow root, fermentum cum radici alphae, and you write radici alphae with careful attention, the unfamiliar letters requiring a slight slowing of your hand. The last name on the tablet is a man who was not originally in your ledger, a stable boy brought to the infirmary only yesterday. His name is Johannes Parvus, and his injury is a broken finger splintered with a twig. The infirmarier's note says that he has now developed a fever, feverish, and that the finger is swollen, digitus tumidus. You find the original entry at the very end of the latest section, the ink still relatively fresh. You draw the cross, and then add the update in the candlelight. The letters are slightly larger than usual, your hand adjusting to the flickering illumination, but they are still neat and even. Johannes Parvus, Iohannes as before. Parvus with its P descending, its a small, its R curved, its IV angled, its U dipped, its Ers curved. Febris. Digitus tumidus. Digitus with its D leaning, its it dotted, its G descending, its it dotted again, its T crossed, its it dipped, its its curved. Tumidus as before. The small entry is complete, and you set the quill down, feeling the quiet ache in your hand that signals the end of the day's labor. You sit for a moment in the candlelight, looking at the page before you. The recurring names, the small crosses, the repeated phrases of fever and swelling and sleeplessness, all of them are now part of the ledger, recorded with the same steady hand and the same quiet heart. The fortress sleeps around you, the stone walls thick and silent, and the only sound is the soft hiss of the candle flame and the distant, rhythmic footsteps of the sentry on his rounds. You flex your fingers, feel the cool air on your face, and then reach for the leather cord to close the gathering. The day's work is done, and the list of the feverish waits quietly in the darkness for the morning light to return. The daylight has gone from the window, leaving only a deep, soft grey that presses against the glassless arch like a held breath. The scriptorium, which all afternoon was warm with the sun's gold, is now a room of shadows. The corners are dark pools, the stone walls have receded into gloom, and the desk before you is lit only by the faint afterglow of the sky. You can still see the page, but the letters you wrote earlier have become indistinct, that black ink merging with the pale brown parchment into a uniform dimness. The time has come to light the candle. You reach for the tallow candle on the corner of the desk, a stout column of rendered fat, its wick a blackened twist of thread. The iron striker and the flint lie beside it, cold to the touch. You take the flint in your left hand, its surface rough and familiar, and the striker in your right, a curved piece of iron with a sharp edge. You strike them together once, a bright spark jumps into the air, brief as a blink, and vanishes. You strike again, a second spark that arcs and dies. On the third strike, the spark lands squarely on the wick, and a tiny flame catches, flickering orange and blue at its base before settling into a steady, golden tongue. You hold the candle for a moment, feeling the faint warmth on your face, then set it carefully into its iron holder on the desk. The flame pushes the darkness back, and the room reassembles itself around you, the shelf of ink pots, the stack of clean parchment, the worn stone of the walls, all of it returning to visibility in the small circle of light. The candle's glow makes the scriptorium feel closer, smaller, as if the walls have drawn inward. The high ceiling disappears into shadow, and the window is now a black rectangle that reflects the candle flame in duplicate, two tiny points of light swimming on the dark glass. The smell of burning tallow rises, a faintly animal scent, warm and a little greasy, mixing with the older smells of ink and dust. You adjust the candle so that its light falls directly on the open ledger, the flame steadying as the wick burns evenly. The page before you is the one you have been working on, still with space for several more entries. The wax tablet from the infirmera lies to the right, and you pick it up, tilting it toward the light to read the next set of names. These are not the familiar names of local men-at-arms or the recurring names of the feverish. These are names from further away, names of knights and lords who have come to the fortress from distant lands, and their letters are shaped differently, their sounds foreign on your tongue. The first of these is Godefridus de Achelon. You read it from the tablet, the stylus marks deep and angular. You sound the name silently in your mind, breaking it into its syllables, Godefridus de Achelon. The first part, Godefridus, you have seen before in other records, but the second part, Achelon, is new to you. It speaks of a place far to the east, a city by the sea, its name exotic and heavy with strange consonants. You dip the quill into the ink pot, the nib slipping below the surface, and then you hold it poised above the parchment. You write the G of Godefridus with extra care, ensuring the curve is broad and even, the crossbar straight. The O is a perfect circle. The D leans backward correctly, the E loops neatly, the F descends in a clean stroke, the R curves inward, the I is dotted precisely, the D leans again, the U dips, the S curves. The whole name takes longer than the names you are used to, your hand moving with a deliberate slowness, checking each letter against the sound in your mind. Then comes de Achelon. The D and E are simple, but Achelon requires your full attention. You write the A as a large triangular letter, its left leg thick, its right leg thin, the crossbar set at the center. The S is a sinuous curve, the C an open arc, the H a tall ascender, the A a small oval, the A another tall ascender, the O a circle, the N a pair of minims. The letters seem to resist your hand, their shapes less practiced, and you pause after the N to check the spelling against the tablet. Satisfied, you add the wound description, a deep cut to the left leg, incisio profunda in crura sinistro. The words are familiar even if the name was not, and you write them more quickly, the letters flowing from the quill with their accustomed ease. You finish the entry and set the quill down, your fingers feeling the slight extra tension that came with the unfamiliar name. The next name on the tablet is Tancredus de Badual. You sound it out, Tancredus de Badualo. The first part, Tancredus, has a hard, strong rhythm. The T a bold letter with a wide crossbar, the A small, the N a pair of minims, the C an open arc, the R curved, the E looped, the D leaning, the U dipped, the S curved. You write it slowly, the letters appearing one by one as if each one requires a separate decision. De Barulo follows, and Barulo is a name that feels round and smooth in your mouth. The B is a grand letter with two stacked bowls. The A is small, the R curved, the U dipped, the O dipped, the O tall, the O circular. You notice that the ink is beginning to pull slightly at the tip of your quill, and you tap it gently against the rim of the pot before continuing. The wound for Tancredus de Barulo is a crossbow bolt to the shoulder, vulnus quadrelli in humero, similar to the archers you recorded earlier. You write the phrase with the same care as the name, the unfamiliar and the familiar now side by side on the page. The candle flame flickers once, a sudden dip and recovery, and your hand pauses briefly waiting for the light to steady. A draught from the window perhaps, or a movement of the air from the door. You shield the flame with your cupped palm for a moment, and then it steadies, and you return to your writing. The third name is the most complex of the evening, Bohemundus Minor. You recognize the name Bohemundus. It is a name of legend, a great lord from across the sea, but the addition of minor, meaning younger or lesser, distinguishes this man from his namesake. You sound the entire name, Bohemundus Minor. The B is another grand letter, its two bowls perfectly rounded, the O circular, the E looped, the M a series of three humps, the U dipped, the N a pair of minims, the D leaning, the U dipped again, the S curved. The word is long, and by the time you reach the final S, you have dipped the quill twice, the ink flowing smoothly each time. Then minor, the MHer, the M8 dotted, the NA pair of minims, the O circular, the R curved. The wound entry describes a sword cut to the side, vulnus gladiae in later, and you write it with the same precise strokes, the L of later, the small, the T crossed, the E looped, the R curved, the E looped again. The foreign names stand out on the page, their letters slightly larger and more deliberate than the others, as if they carry with them the weight of distant lands. You look at the three entries together. Godifredus de Achelon, Tancredus de Barulo, Bohemundus Minor. They are like visitors from another world, and you have welcomed them onto the parchment with the same quiet hospitality you offer all names. As you prepare to write the next entry, a small movement of your hand causes the quill to tremble. A single drop of ink, black and glossy, falls from the nib and lands on the parchment just below the last line of writing. It sits there, a perfect, dark bead, its surface reflecting the candle flame in miniature. You do not rush. Panic has no place in the scriptorium. Instead, you set the quill down calmly and reach for the small leather pouch that hangs from a hook on the side of the desk. Inside the pouch is a fine powder made from ground bone ash, a substance as white as chalk and as soft as flour. You open the pouch with a gentle tug on its drawstring and pour a tiny mound of the powder onto the ink drop. The powder absorbs the ink instantly, drawing it up into itself and turning from white to a deep grey. You watch it for a few seconds, waiting until the liquid is fully absorbed, and then you take a small dry brush made of stiff horsehair and sweep the powder carefully into your cupped palm. The mark on the parchment is now only a faint grey smear, no larger than a grain of millet, barely visible even in the candlelight. You blow on it softly, your breath a gentle warmth, and the last traces of moisture dry. The mistake, if it can be called that, is corrected. You dust your palm off into a small clay pot kept for debris, and then return your attention to the page. The interruption has been brief, a small quiet moment of attention in the long evening, and it has passed without any disturbance to the peace of the room. You dip the quill again and resume the copying. The next names on the tablet are less foreign, returning to the familiar soldiers and servants of the fortress, but you continue to write them with the same extra care the evening seems to require. The candlelight, though steady, is not as clear as daylight, and the shadows it casts can trick the eye. A letter that looks complete may, upon closer inspection, be missing a minimal or a crossbar, and so you lean closer to the page, your nose almost touching the parchment, and check each word as you write it. The flame makes a soft whispering sound, and the smell of tallow is now a constant presence, warm and enclosing. Outside the window, the sky has turned fully black, and the stars are invisible against the dark stone of the fortress walls. The scriptorium is an island of light in a sea of night, and you are its sole inhabitant. While you are forming the letters of a simple entry for a guard with a sprained wrist, a new sound reaches you through the thick stone. It is faint at first, a low vibration that you feel as much as hear. You pause, the quill lifted from the page, and listen. The sound is the chanting of vespers, the evening prayer, rising from the chapel on the far side of the fortress courtyard. The voices of the monks and lay brothers blend together into a single, sonorous hum, the words indistinguishable, but the melody clear and slow. The chant rises and falls, a gentle breathing rhythm that seems to pulse through the very stone of the tower. You let your hands rest on the desk and allow the sound to wash over you. It is a familiar sound, one you have heard every evening for as many years as you have been in this place, and it carries with it a deep, resonant peace. The Latin words, though unheard clearly, are known to your heart. Deus in adiutorium meum intende, Domine adjuvandum mea festina. O God, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me. You do not sing along, but your mind follows the melody, the rise and fall of the chant, matching the rise and fall of your own breath. The candle flame seems to sway slightly in time, though there is no draught. The moment stretches timeless and calm, and you sit there in the quiet, listening. After a time, the chanting fades, the last notes dying away into the night. The silence that follows is deep and complete, broken only by the soft hiss of the candle. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air in your lungs, and then pick up the quill once more. The interruption has not broken your rhythm, but has instead deepened it, as if the chanting has settled into your bones and now moves your hand with a new steadiness. You dip the quill and continue writing, the words flowing onto the page with a gentle, unhurried grace. The guard's sprained wrist is recorded, then a cook's burn, then a mason's cut. The names are simple: Henricus, Martinus, Petrus. The letters form themselves almost without your will, your hand moving across the page in a quiet dance. You glance at the stack of clean parchment on your left and notice, with a mild satisfaction, that it has diminished. When you began this gathering of pages, the stack was thick, its edges aligned, its surface smooth. Now it is noticeably thinner, the remaining sheets perhaps a third of what was there this morning. Each page you fill is added to the stack of finished work on your right, and that stack has grown correspondingly tall, its leather cord straining slightly to hold the pages together. The progress is visible, tangible, a small concrete measure of the day's labor. You run your hand over the finished stack, feeling the slight roughness of the parchment edges, the faint texture of the ink that has dried and settled into the fibers. It is a good feeling, not of pride, but of quiet order, a satisfaction that comes from seeing the work move forward, sheet by sheet, name by name. You return to the current page. The next entry on the tablet is a short one, just a name and a single word: Odo famulus quis. Odo the servant, rest. There is no wound to record, only a note that the man has been excused from duties due to exhaustion. You write his name with the same care as all the others, the O a perfect circle, the D leaning, the O circular again, and then famulus and quis. The word quis is a gentle one, its Q with its tail, its U dipped, its I dotted, its E looped, its E's curved. It sits on the page like a small promise of peace. After it, you add the date and then move on to the next name, your hand continuing its steady rhythm. The candle has burned down by a thumb's width, the melted tallow pooling around the wick in a small, liquid lake. You pause to trim the wick using a small pair of iron snuffers that lie on the desk. You pinch the blackened tip of the wick carefully, removing the charred portion, and the flame brightens immediately, its light growing stronger and clearer. The small piece of burnt wick falls onto the stone desk, and you brush it away with a sweep of your hand. The candle will last for several more hours, plenty of time to finish the remaining entries on the tablet. You settle back onto the stool, your spine straight, your feet flat on the cold stone, and you write. The names continue, a mix of familiar and unfamiliar, their letters flowing from your quill in an unbroken stream. You have reached a section of the tablet where the entries are for men who are resting quietly, their wounds healing well. The phrases you write are peaceful ones. Vulnus mundum, the wound clean. Requisitsit, he rests. Dormit bene, he sleeps well. These words are a balm after the earlier entries of fever and swelling, and you write them with a light, gentle hand, the quill barely pressing into the parchment. The letters seem to float on the page, small and neat and calm. You write the name of a young squire, Johannes de Curtraco, and add the note that his wound is healing cleanly and he is eating again, vulnus mundum, manducat. The word manducat, he eats, is a simple, hopeful word, and you form its letters with a small, quiet care. The evening deepens, and the fortress around you settles into the profound silence of the late night. The sentries on the walls make their rounds, but their footsteps are too distant to hear. The only sounds are the scratching of your quill, the soft hiss of the candle, and the occasional creak of the tower settling into the cold. You are alone with the names, the pages, the ink. The world outside the scriptorium has ceased to exist, and there is only this small circle of light, this wooden desk, this steady hand moving across the parchment. Time is measured not in hours, but in the number of lines you have written, the number of pages you have filled, the slow, beautiful diminishment of the stack of clean sheets on your left. You finish another page, the last line ending with a flourish that curls the tail of a final S. You lift the sheet carefully, hold it up to the candlelight for a moment to check that the ink is dry, and then lay it face down on the finished stack. The new page you pull toward you is fresh and pale, its surface unmarked. You smooth it with your palm and set the lead weight on the corner to hold it open. The quill dips, the ink flows, and the first name of the new page begins to form under your hand. The evening shadows press against the window, and the candle burns steadily on, a small, faithful sun in the quiet tower room. The candle has been burning for some hours now, and its flame, though still steady, has begun to sink lower into the pool of melted tallow. The light it casts is softer than before, a warm amber glow that touches the pages of the ledger, and the wax tablet with a gentle, wavering hand. You know that before the wick burns too low, and the flame begins to gutter, there is a task that must be completed. Each day, before the book is closed, you must review the entries you have copied against the infirmera's original notes. This nightly review is a quiet ritual, a final, careful pass over the day's work that ensures no error has crept into the record. You reach for the wax tablet, still marked with the faint scratches of the stylus, and place it directly beside the open ledger. The two surfaces lie side by side in the candlelight, the pale brown parchment and the darker honey-colored wax, each holding its own version of the same information. You begin at the top of the page with the first entry you wrote this morning. The tablet reads Gelelmus de Sancto Joanne, vulnus in sissio profunda, in brachio dextro, sutura cum filo ligni. Your finger, the index finger of your left hand, touches the first word on the tablet, feeling the slight groove of the letters, while your right hand rests on the corresponding line of the ledger. You read both versions simultaneously, your eyes moving from tablet to page and back again, checking each letter against its twin. The G of Gilmus is correct on the page, its broad curve matching the stylus mark. The U is a simple dip, the E dotted, the double L tall. You trace the name to its end, then move to the wound description. Incisio profunda. The letters align. In brachio dextro, no discrepancy. Sutura cum filolini, the final I is dot, the E on is. The first entry is sound. You allow a small breath of satisfaction, a quiet release that barely stirs the air, and your finger moves down to the next name. Rodolphus Filius Balduin follows. The sword wound across the ribs treated with honey and cloth. Your finger traces the wax tablet's line, Rodolphus, then Filius with its single L, then Balduini. On the page you check the R, the A, the D, the U, the L, the F, the U, the S, all present. The wound description, vulnus gladii percostas, mel et panis mundus impositus. You compare phrase by phrase. The word costas catches your eye for a moment. The C and O and S and S and E and E and S, all in their proper order. The honey, mel, is spelled with its single L and its E. The cloth, panis, has its double N. Satisfied, you move on. The checking has a rhythm of its own, slower than the writing but no less steady, a careful, deliberate pace that matches the quiet of the late evening. Outside the window, the night is still, the fortress walls silent and dark. The only sound is the soft hiss of the candle and the faint whisper of your finger moving across the wax. The third entry is Petrus de Morisco with his shoulder wound. You check the P, the E, the T, the R, the U, the S, then de Morisco with its M of two peaks, its A, its R, its I, its S, its C, its O. The shoulder humero is written with an H and a U and an M and an R and an and an O. You nod, almost imperceptibly, and move to the fourth entry, the first of the archers. Petrus Sagittarius, the crossbow bolt in the thigh, fever on the third day. This entry is longer, and you take your time with it, checking the unfamiliar word quadrelli, the Q, the U, the A, the D, the R, the A, the double L, the I. The fever note, Fabrice died tertio, you compare with particular care because fever entries are serious and must be accurate. The word Fabrice is correct, the F descending, the E looping, the B rising, the R curving, the I dotted, the S curving. Diurcio matches. You continue through the other archers, Iohannis, Guido, Stephanus, each with their bolt wounds and their fevers. The repeated words make the checking easier in some ways, your eye now accustomed to the shape of quadrelli and febris, but you do not allow the familiarity to dull your attention. Each entry receives the same focused scrutiny, your finger pausing on each letter, your mind registering each correct match. When you reach the section of recurring names, the feverish updates you added earlier, the checking takes on a slightly different quality. These are second entries, additions to existing records, and they must be verified not only against the tablet, but also against their original entries to ensure the cross-reference is clear. You find Hugo de Monaco's name on the tablet, Revisus, Rubifaciae, Frigus et Calor. On the page, beside the small cross you drew, you read the same words. Rubifaciae, the R, the 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 A, the E, the I, the E. Frigus et Calor, the F, the R, the I, the U, the S, the E, the T, the A, the A, the A, the L, the O, the R. The entries match. Stephanus Carpentarius, the carpenter with the crushed hand, his update of fever and swelling and refusal of food, all present and correct. Ivo Cossi Filius, the cook's helper's son, his high fever and night sweats and the poultice of garlic and bread mold, all verified. Rogerius Scutiger, the shield-bearer, his great heat and sleeplessness and delirium, the draught of poppy and mandrake recorded accurately. Each cross-check is a small, quiet act of confirmation, a tightening of the threads that hold the record together. The foreign names require a little more time. Godefridus de Ascalon, with its unfamiliar consonants, you read from the tablet and then find on the page. You trace the G, the O, the D, the F, the R, the I, the D, the U, the Uz. Then Diachylon with its A and its S and its S and its A 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 and its O and its O and its O. The wound, incisio profunda in crur sinistro, is correct. Tancredus de Barullo, with its B and its A and its and its and its and its O and its O, matches. Bohemindus Minor, the longest of the foreign names, requires you to lean closer to the page in the flickering light. You check the B, the O, the A, the N, the O, the N, the D, the U, the S, then minor M-I-N-I-N-O-R. The sword cut in the side, vulnus gladii and latadere, is written as it should be. The foreign names, which earlier had felt like visitors from distant lands, now seem to have settled into the page, their letters no longer strange, but simply part of the larger tapestry of the ledger. It is as you are checking the next name, a simple entry from man at arms named Robertus Famulus with a bruised shoulder, that you find the error. Your finger on the tablet reads Robertus Famulus, contusio humeri, quaes. Your eyes move to the page and you scan the line, Robertus Famulus, contusio humeri, quaes. But something catches your attention, a small, subtle wrongness in the shape of one word. You look closer, holding the candle nearer to the page. The tablet clearly has the foreign name, Godefridus de Ascalon, with its final syllable spelled A-L-O-N. On the page, in your own hand, the name reads Godefridus de Ascalon, the last letter before the N and A instead of an O. The error is tiny, just a single closed loop where an open curve should be, but it is unmistakable. Your steady hand, so careful for so many hours, has substituted an A for an O in a name that was unfamiliar to your tongue. You pause, your finger resting beside the mistake, and you take a slow breath. The scriptorium is silent, the flames steady, the night dark beyond the window. There is no reproach in the air, only the quiet recognition that a correction must be made. You reach for the small knife that lies on the shelf to your right, the same knife you used this morning to trim the quill and smooth the parchment. Its handle is smooth wood, its blade thin and slightly curved at the tip, sharp enough to scrape ink from skin without gouging. You hold it as you would a quill, with a light, precise grip, and bring the blade to the parchment at a shallow angle, the edge barely kissing the surface. The erroneous A sits just before the N, a small round letter that you now begin to scrape away. The motion is gentle and slow, a series of short, careful strokes that lift the ink and the thinnest layer of the parchment in a fine, dry powder. The sound is a soft, rhythmic scratching, quieter even than the quill, like the whisper of a moth's wing against stone. You work patiently, stopping often to blow away the dust, until the A is gone entirely, leaving a faint pale patch where the letter once was. The surface slightly roughened but intact. You test the area with the tip of your finger, feeling the slight texture change, and then you set the knife aside. Now you take up the quill, dip it into the ink, and tap it once against the pot's rim. You hold the quill over the scraped patch, your hand steady, and you write the correct letter, an O, a perfect open circle that fits neatly into the space the A once occupied. The ink is slightly darker than the surrounding letters, the fresh stroke sitting on top of the roughened surface rather than sinking into it as the original did, but the difference is subtle. You watch the ink dry for a moment, its glossy wetness fading to matte black, and then you blow on it softly to set it. When you tilt the page to the candlelight, the correction is barely visible, a tiny ghost of a change that only the most careful eye would notice. The name now reads Ascalon, as it should, and the record is once again whole. You set the quill down and allow yourself a small, quiet moment of rest. Your eyes move to the window, where the night presses against the stone arch in a deep, velvety black. The air in the scriptorium has grown cooler, the stone walls releasing the last of their stored warmth into the darkness, and you feel a slight chill on the back of your neck, where your habit does not quite cover. You reach up and draw the wool closer around your shoulders, tucking it under your chin, and the rough fabric is a comfort against the cold. The candle flame sways gently, as if stirred by an unseen breath, and then straightens again, its light steady and calm. Far below, muffled by the thick walls of the tower, you hear a new sound, the faint rhythmic jingle of a sentry's mail as he walks his slow circuit along the fortress wall. The sound comes and goes, a tiny metallic whisper that marks the passing of the night hours without urgency, a companionable noise that reminds you that you are not the only one awake in this great, dark fortress. You listen to it for a moment, the jingle and the silence and the jingle, a soft, broken pattern that feels as old as the stones themselves. You return your attention to the review. The remaining entries on the tablet are fewer now, the stack of unchecked names grown small. Tancredus de Barullo with his crossbow bolt in the shoulder. You check swiftly. The T, the A, the A, the A, the A, the D, the the A, the D, the the A, the D, and it's A, and it's and it's and it's and it's The wound, Fonus quadrulli in humero, is correct. Bohemondus Minor, the longest of the foreign names, you verify letter by letter, finding the B, the O, the A, the E, the N, the M, the O, the N, the N, the D, the O, the S, then minor, minor. The sword cut in the side, vulnus gladii in lettera, matches the tablet exactly. The foreign names which earlier had seemed so strange and difficult are now just names on a page, their letters no more or less important than any others. You have given them the same care, and now you have confirmed that the care was sufficient. The simpler entries follow, the men-at-arms and servants whose injuries were minor, whose treatments were rest and bandages. Henricus de Ponto, his bruised elbow checked. Stephanus Textor, his cut thumb checked. Ivo Parvis, his burned palm checked. Martinus Faber, his splinter checked. Each name is a small, unremarkable anchor that holds the day's work to the truth. You verify them all, your finger moving from tablet to page, your eyes scanning the letters, your mind quiet and focused. The final entry on the tablet is the stable boy, Johannes Parvus, his broken finger splintered with a twig, his new fever noted. You find his name at the bottom of the page, the ink still relatively fresh, and you check it. Johannes Parvus, digitus tumidus, febris. The cross is beside his name, the update below it. All is correct. The review is complete. You sit back on the stool, your spine straightening, and you look at the page before you. It is filled with names, each one a small dark constellation of letters against the pale brown parchment. The ink is dry, the corrections are made, the record is whole. You lift the sheet by its edges, careful not to touch the writing, and hold it up to the candlelight one last time. The flame shines through the thin parchment, illuminating the letters from behind, and for a moment the page seems to glow, the names floating in a warm amber light. Then you lower it and place it on the stack of finished sheets to your right. The stack is thick now, a substantial gathering of pages that represents the day's labor, each sheet aligned with the others, the edges straight, the leather cord tied neatly around them. You rest your hand on the stack, feeling the slight give of the parchment, the quiet weight of all those recorded names. The scriptorium is dark except for the candle, the corners of the room lost in shadow, the window a black mirror that reflects your own dim shape and the tiny flame. The air is cool and still, smelling of tallow and ink and old stone, a smell that has soaked into the walls over decades and will remain long after the candle is extinguished. You draw your habit closer still, the wool warm against your shoulders, and you listen to the distant jingle of the sentry's mail as he continues his patient round. The sound is a comfort, a quiet marker of time that requires nothing from you, asks no action, no thought. It simply is, as the stone is, as the night is, as the names on the page are. Tomorrow the work will begin again, and there will be new names, new wounds, new updates to record. But for now the review is finished, the book is ready to be closed, and the fortress sleeps under the vast, silent sky. The deep quiet of the late night has settled over the scriptorium, a silence so complete that it seems to have a texture of its own, soft and thick as wool. The fortress below is utterly still, the sentry's jingle having faded into the distance, the chapel bell long since silent, even the wind holding its breath beyond the stone walls. You are alone with the candle, which is burned down to a short, steady stub. Its flame a small, wavering crown of gold above a pool of liquid tallow. The light it casts is dimmer now, a warm, drowsy glow that barely reaches the corners of the room, and the shadows under the shelves and along the edges of the desk have deepened into velvety black. The air is cool and smells of burnt fat and old dust, a familiar, comforting scent that has marked the end of countless evenings in this room. The stack of finished pages on your right has grown tall, a substantial gathering of parchment filled with the day's careful script. But the work is not quite complete. There remains a small sheaf of blank sheets on your left, the last few pages of the gathering, and the wax tablet still carries a handful of names yet to be copied. These final entries are of a different character than the ones that came before. They belong to the wounded who are resting quietly, those whose injuries have healed enough that the infirmera has written only the briefest of updates. The words you will write now are peaceful ones, words of rest and recovery, and the act of writing them feels like a gentle slowing, a deceleration of the day's long labor into something softer and more still. You draw the last blank sheet toward you, its surface pale and smooth in the candlelight. The quill, still resting in its holder, has a slightly worn nib now, the tip beginning to soften from the many hours of use. You will not trim it again tonight. It will serve well enough for these final, simple entries. You dip it into the ink pot, the level now low enough that you must tilt the pot slightly to reach the liquid, and you tap the nib gently against the rim. The first name on the tablet is Henricus de Ponto, the man-at-arms with the bruised elbow. Beside his name, the infirmera has written a single word, requisit. He rests. You find his original entry in the ledger, the ink still fresh from this morning, and beneath it you add the date and the word requisit. The letters form slowly under your hand, the R with its inward curve, the E with its small loop, the Q with its tail descending below the line, the U dipping, the I dotted, the E looping again, the I dotted, the E looping again, the S curved, the C open, the I dotted, the T crossed. The word is a quiet, gentle thing, and it sits on the page like a small sigh of relief. You pause after writing it, your hand resting on the desk, and you feel a slight easing in your own shoulders, as if the word itself has carried some of the day's weight away. The next entry is for Stephanus Textor, the weaver who cut his thumb on a loom shuttle. His update is Vulnus Mundum, the wound clean. You find his name in the ledger and write the phrase beneath it. Vulnus, the V angled, the U dipped, the L tall, the N a pair of minims, the U dipped, the S curved. Mundum, the M with its 3 humps, the U dipped, the N another pair, the D leaning, the U dipped, the N another pair, the D leaning, the U dipped again, the mumped once more. The words are simple and satisfying, the kind of entry that requires no further attention, no cross, no follow-up. They are the closing of a small chapter, the final note in a brief, unremarkable story. You move on to the next name, Martinus Faber, the blacksmith with a splinter under his fingernail. His update is dormant. He sleeps. You write it beneath his name. The E, a perfect circle, the R curved, the humped, the I dotted, the T crossed. Dormant. The word is a lullaby in itself, its soft consonants and short vowels, a gentle, murmured sound. You imagine for just a moment the blacksmith lying on his pallet in the infirmary, his hand bandaged, his breathing slow and even, and then the image fades, and you are only aware of the page, and the quill, and the candle's soft light. The third name is for a young man whose entry you remember writing earlier in the week, a stable hand named Guido Parvus, who had been kicked by a mule. His original wound was a deep bruise to the chest, contusio pectoris, and he had been feverish for several days. The update on the tablet reads requisicid, febris cessit. He rests. The fever has gone. You find his entry in the ledger, the original letter still clear, and you add the update with a hand that feels almost tender, the quill barely pressing into the parchment. Requiescits. You have already written tonight, and the letters come easily. Free processit, Fibris with its eth descending, its e looping, its b rising, its r curved, its is curved, cessit with its s erved c open, its e looped, its double sinuous, its is dotted, its t crossed. The fever has gone. The words are a small, quiet celebration. Though nothing in your face or your hand betrays any emotion. You simply write them, and they are true, and that is enough. The pattern of these final entries establishes itself quickly. The phrases repeat, but not in a way that feels monotonous. Rather, they are like a refrain in a gentle song, each repetition deepening the sense of peace. The words requiescit, dormit volnus mundum, fibris cessit, appear again and again as you work through the last names on the tablet. Ivo Cosi Filius, the cook's helper's son, his cheek wound now clean and healing, volnus mundum, requiescitur. Rogera Scutiga, the shield-bearer whose delirium had been so troubling, now sleeping peacefully after his draught of poppy and mandrake, dormit, quies. Petrus Sagittarius, the archer whose bolt wound in the thigh had brought a fever, now resting with the fever gone, fibris cessit, volnus mundum. You write each update with the same slow, peaceful hand, the quill moving across the page in long, unhurried strokes. The letters seem to float onto the parchment, their shapes soft and rounded, their blackness gentle against the pale brown skin. Your hand moves almost without thought now, the rhythm so deeply established that it feels less like work and more like breathing. The quill dips, the ink flows, the letters form. The scratching sound is barely audible, a soft, rhythmic whisper that blends with the silence rather than breaking it. The candle flame flickers occasionally, a brief, dancing movement that sends shadows swaying across the page, but you do not pause. You have written by candlelight many times before, and your eyes know how to follow the letters, even when the light wavers. The warmth of the flame touches your face, a faint, gentle heat that you are only dimly aware of, and the smell of tallow is now so familiar that it is like the smell of your own skin. As you turn to the very last sheet of blank parchment, the one that has been waiting at the bottom of the stack, you hear a soft sound behind you. It is the creak of the door, the same quiet creak you heard earlier when the servant brought your bread and wine. But this time the hour is much later, and the sound is softer, more tentative. You do not turn. Footsteps cross the stone floor, light and quick, the whisper of sandals, and then a voice speaks your name in a low, hushed tone. You look up and see one of the lay brothers, a young man with a thin face and dark eyes, standing beside your desk. His habit is rumpled, as if he has been roused from sleep, and in his hand he carries a small scrap of parchment, not a wax tablet. He offers it to you with a slight bow of his head, and you take it from him gently. The scrap is folded once, and you open it carefully. The message is written in the infirmera's hand, a quick, scribbled note in faint ink. It reads simply, Johannes Parvus, digitus fractus, circulus ligatus. Johannes the small, broken finger, splintered with a twig. Beneath this, a single word, requisitur. You look up at the lay brother, and he whispers that the boy was brought in only an hour ago, a stable boy who had caught his finger in a rope while leading a horse. The infirmera set the break with a small twig from an olive tree and bound it with a strip of linen. The boy is now sleeping peacefully in the infirmary, and the infirmera, diligent as always, wanted the entry added to the ledger before the night was through. You nod to the lay brother, a small, slow movement of your head, and he bows again and withdraws, his sandals whispering back across the stone, and the door closing with a soft thud. You turn back to the desk and look at the scrap of parchment in your hand. The name Johannes Parvus is simple and humble, a name that speaks of youth and smallness and the ordinary world of stables and horses and ropes. You set the scrap beside the ledger and take up your quill once more. The inkpot is nearly empty, just a small dark pool at the very bottom, but there is enough for this one last entry. You dip the quill, tilting the pot carefully, and the nib drinks the remaining ink. Then you bring the quill to the final blank page and write the name, Johannes Parvus. The I is a tall letter, its descender dropping below the line, its crossbar set at the top. The O is a perfect circle, the H tall, the A small, the N a pair of minimums, the N another pair, the E looped, the S curved. Then parvus, the P descending, the A small, the R curved, the V angled, the U dipped, the S curved. The name sits at the top of the page, small and neat, the last entry of the night. You add the wound description, digitus fractus, circulus legatus, broken finger, splinted with a twig. Digitus, the deaning, the I dotted, the G descending in a loop, the I dotted again, the T crossed, the U dipped, the S curved. Fractus, the F descending, the R curved, the A small, the C open, the T crossed, the U dipped, the S curved. Circulus, the S sinuous, the U dipped, the R curved, the C open, the U dipped again, the L tall, the U dipped once more, the S curved. Legatus, the L tall, the I dotted, the G descending, the A small, the T crossed, the U dipped, the S curved. You picture the olive twig, a small smooth piece of wood with silvery bark, bound with a strip of clean linen around a child's small finger. The image is vivid but brief, and it passes as you add the final word from the infirmaria's note, requisites. He rests. You write it with the same care as all the other times tonight, the letters forming a quiet conclusion to the entry, and then you set the quill down on its rest for the final time this day. The candle has burned very low now. The flame is small and blue at its base, the wick a charred curl that barely protrudes from the melted tallow. The pool of liquid fat around it has spread wide, nearly touching the edges of the iron holder, and the light it casts is a faint, trembling glow that struggles to reach the edges of the page. You know that in a few minutes the flame will gutter and die, but for now it still burns, and you use its last light to look over the entry you have just written. The name Johannes Parvis is clear, the letters well formed. The wound description is correct. The date, which you add now in the small space beneath the entry, is pretty, Ides Iunii, the day before the Ides of June. The final word, requiescit June, sits at the bottom of the entry like a small, peaceful stone. All is in order. The day's work is complete. You place the final sheet of parchment on the stack of finished pages, aligning its edges with the others with a gentle tap. The stack is now a thick, substantial bundle, its leather cord straining slightly. You take the cord and wrap it around the gathering twice, pulling it snug, and then tie a simple knot. The same knot you have tied every night for years. The pages are secure, the record is whole, and the book can be set aside until morning. You place the bundle at the corner of the desk, where it will wait for the infirmaria's assistant to collect it, and then you begin to tidy your tools. The quill you lay flat on its rest, the nib pointing away from you. The ink pot you cover with its wooden stopper, pressing it down firmly to keep the remaining ink from drying out. The wax tablet you wipe clean with a scrap of cloth, erasing the day's stylus marks so that it is ready for tomorrow's notes. The small knife, the pumice stone, the ritherstone weight, all are returned to their proper places on the shelf. The desk is clear now, its surface wiped clean of dust and ink smudges, the wood gleaming faintly in the dying candlelight. You sit for a moment on your stool, your hands resting in your lap, and you let the silence of the scriptorium settle around you. The room is dark and still, the shadows deep in the corners, the window a black arch against the stone. The air is cool and clean, carrying the faint lingering scents of ink and tallow and old dust. Your body feels tired, but not unpleasantly so, a quiet, deep weariness that comes from a day spent in focused, patient labor. Your fingers are slightly stiff, the joints of your right hand warm from the sustained grip of the quill, and you flex them slowly, opening and closing your hand several times. The movement is soothing, a final, gentle release of the day's tension. Outside, the fortress is utterly silent, the sentry having completed his rounds, the chapel dark and empty, the infirmary quiet with its sleeping patients. The whole world seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the first grey light of dawn. The candle flame gives one last, brief flutter, a tiny bright spasm, and then it goes out. A thin trail of smoke rises from the wick, a pale grey thread that catches the faintest light from the window and then disperses into the darkness. You are left in the deep, soft blackness of the scriptorium, a darkness so complete that you cannot see your own hands before you. But you do not need to see. You know this room by heart, every shelf and stool and flagstone, and you rise from the desk with the ease of long practice. Your sandals find the floor, your hand finds the edge of the desk, and you turn toward the door. The work is nearly done, and the quiet hours have carried you gently to the edge of sleep. You are about to tie the leather cord around a finished gathering, when your eye falls once more upon the wax tablet. It lies beside the ink pot, its surface dim in the failing light, and you realize you have not checked its edges. The infermerer often writes his last notes of the day in the margins, small hurried scratches that are easily overlooked. You pick up the tablet and tilt it toward the faint grey glow from the window, the last residue of starlight seeping through the high arch. There, in the lower right corner, almost worn smooth by handling, is one final entry. The stylus marks are shallow but clear. Dominus fulco de petra incisa, obiit in pace. The words are followed by the date, Pridi idus eumi, the same day you have been recording all these hours. You read the entry twice, letting the meaning settle into the quiet of the room. Dominus fulco de petra incisa, a knight of the fortress, has died peacefully in the night, his wound finally overcome. The note is not a request for action or treatment, it is simply a final record, the closing of a life that has been part of these pages for many days. You set the tablet down gently, its wooden frame clacking softly against the stone desk, and you know that this last name must be added to the ledger before the book can be closed. The candle has gone out, its flame extinguished moments ago, but you still have a small clay lamp on the corner shelf, a shallow dish with a pinched spout and a twist of flax for a wick. You reach for it in the darkness, your fingers finding its familiar shape, and you bring it to the desk. Beside it is a tiny jug of olive oil, and you pour a thin stream into the lamp, the oil glugging softly. With the iron striker and flint, you coax a spark onto the wick, and after several attempts a small flame catches, no larger than a bean, its light a soft, golden glow that pushes the shadows back just enough to illuminate the page. You settle onto the stool once more, feeling the cool wood through your habit, and draw the ledger toward you. The stack of finished pages is to your right, and the last sheet you wrote, bearing the name of the stable boy Johannes Parvus, is still on top, its ink dry. You lift that sheet carefully and set it aside, then turn to the next blank page, the very last one in the gathering, its surface pale and untouched. The quill is still on its rest, its nib slightly splayed from the long day's work. You will not trim it again. There is only one entry left, and it will serve. The inkpot is nearly empty, just a thin, dark residue at the bottom, but you tilt it and coax the last of the ink onto the nib. The liquid is thicker now, almost syrupy, and you tap it gently to remove any excess. You bring the quill to the page and write the first word, Dominus. The D is a grand letter, its ascender leaning backward, its bowl a full, sweeping curve that requires a slow turn of your wrist. The O is a perfect circle, the MA series of 3 humps, the NA pair of minims, the U a simple dip, the S a sinuous curve. The ink flows reluctantly at first, but then it catches, and the letters appear on the parchment with a quiet, solemn clarity. You pause to dip the quill again, tilting the pot once more, and then write the next part of the name, Fulco. The F is a tall letter, its descender dropping below the line, its crossbar a thin horizontal stroke. The U dips, the L rises tall. The U dips, the L rises tall. The C is an open curve. The O is circular. The name feels solid and ancient, its consonants heavy with the weight of a life now ended. You dip the quill a third time and write De Petra Incisse. The D leans, the E loops, and then Petra, the P with its grand ascender and closed bowl, the E looped, the T crossed, the R curved, the R curved. Incessa follows, the I tall, the NA pair of minims, the C open, the I dotted, the S sinuous, the A small. The full name stretches across the top of the page, a single, unbroken line of careful letters, and you pause for a moment, looking at it in the lamplight. It is the last name you will write today, and perhaps the last name this knight will ever have written, a small, permanent mark in the great, slow river of the fortress's history. Now you add the traditional words, the phrase that closes a life in these records, "Albeit in pace." He died in peace. You write "albeit" first, the O a perfect circle, the B with its tall ascender, the I dotted again, the T crossed. The word is short but heavy, and your hand moves slowly, the quill barely pressing into the parchment. Then in pace, the E dotted, the NA pair of minims, and pace with its P descending, it's a small, its E open, its E looped. The phrase is a gentle final cadence, a quiet amen at the end of a long prayer. You add the date, Predi idus Aini, the same date you have written many times today, its letters now familiar as your own breath. When the last letter is formed, you set the quill down on its rest and look at the completed entry. The ink is glossy and wet, the letters slightly thicker than the others on the page due to the thickened ink, but they are clear and true. You blow on them softly, a gentle sustained breath that makes the lamplight flicker and dance. The ink dries slowly in the cool air, the gloss fading to a matte black, and you wait patiently, your hands folded in your lap, your breathing slow and even. The scriptorium is utterly silent now, the kind of silence that seems to press against the ears like a held breath. The small flame of the oil lamp casts a warm, steady circle of light on the desk, and beyond that circle, the room disappears into deep, soft shadow. You listen to the quiet, and in it you can almost hear the faint, distant echo of the fortress's own breathing, the slow settling of stone on stone, the creak of a timber somewhere far below. The knight Donus Fulco de Petra Incisa is at peace, his name recorded, his story closed. You sit for a few more moments, allowing the ink to dry completely, and then you lift the page carefully by its edges. It is the last sheet, and it will join the stack of finished work. You place it face down, on top,